trailing by 2 possessions. Scadaboo's going to try to throw it downfield, and it is caught, and into the end zone goes Malik McClain. Cam Scadaboo.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
To stay alive, can they hook 'em? Touchdown, Matthew Golden!
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Scadaboo wrapped up, sent back, and then goes forward. Is he in? Yes!
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
They get to Judkins again, and there is Smith roaming free, breaks a tackle. Ohio State strikes quickly from 45 yards.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Off the fake down the middle. Caught in stride. Abuka touchdown. Buckeyes on fire.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go on this Friday afternoon. 365 Sports on the third day of the year, January, of course, of 2025. David Smoak, Paul Catalina to my left, Craig Smoak to my right. We have Garrett Ross inside the studio today running the mothership, and also Andrew is here today with us as well as a part of 365 Sports. We now know the college football playoff semifinals. Notre Dame was impressive in their win against Georgia. Obviously, Texas had already advanced. Penn State had advanced, and Ohio State had advanced. And I just thought Notre Dame, and I mentioned this yesterday, and maybe I didn't ask it as well, but it just seemed like Penn State, Notre Dame, very solid. Nothing really flashy about either team. Both have fantastic quarterback play, both stingy on defense, and that I just felt like everyone was looking at different names. And Notre Dame yesterday was very, very impressive and had a huge start against Georgia.
This is one of the few things I feel like I got totally right when I was picking these games. I just thought that with a backup quarterback who's just okay, he's okay. He's not anything great yet. Not to say that he won't be, but right now he's just okay. That it was going to be hard for a Georgia offense that wasn't really even dynamic with their starter all year long. And part of that was, not Carson Beck. It's that, they lost Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, and they didn't really replace him with anybody of note. And they had a lot of offensive line injuries, and a lot of those guys came back, but it was still, it was wonky by Georgia standards all year long. And Notre Dame plays as physical as anybody in the country, if not maybe the most physical brand of football there is. Riley Leonard is built for big moments. He's such a gamer. He just does not care what's going on. He's just tough and goes out and makes it. And I thought that was going to be an advantage for Notre Dame. And, Kirby Smart, for one of the first times in his career, got outfoxed by Marcus Freeman in a lot of different ways. So much so, you saw him arguing. He didn't think that run everybody off and run everybody on was legal, so you can't do that. And I think the official was like, well, we're sorry you didn't think of it, Kirby, but
one of the things that I thought was one of the keys to that, I saw this late last night, was that if the snapper doesn't touch the ball, then it's not what they would call alive or dead, whatever the reason. But if he would have gotten down, crouched, touched the ball, and then they had done that, then it would have been looked at as a penalty. But you're right, Marcus Freeman, they had a great game plan against Georgia, and they ran the ball well enough, but they had the huge return, had the big fumble early, and Craig, they move on to play against what looks like almost a mirror image in Penn State.
Yeah, that was a tremendous win for Notre Dame. Hats off to the Irish, and I don't say that as somebody who just loves them to death or anything, but I give credit where credit is due, and they've gone out and won these first couple of games, and they were certainly an impressive, well-coached, well-executed team last night against the Dawgs, who did have the issue at quarterback that had you feeling maybe not as confident with Gunnar Stockton as compared to what you normally have there at QB1, although your QB1 wasn't exactly the guy leading you the way most of this season either. Your defense was for the most part, but I do think that Notre Dame was the better team last night, all things considered, and I saw a lot of that conversation around exactly what you're talking about there with the punt call and running the team off the field and running them back on. And I just think that was a brilliant move by Marcus Freeman. Now, getting into the weeds of, like, did his elbow flinch before he – like, I saw that conversation. That conversation's been going on since that play happened, basically. I think if you are somebody who is more prone to side with Georgia or the SEC, you feel like they got that call wrong. If you're somebody who doesn't, you feel like they got that call right. I feel like it's like targeting – I don't know what the rules are anymore on any given game in any given league in any given situation. So I just say you can't let the officials beat you. And it wasn't the officials that single-handedly beat Georgia last night, if at all. Notre Dame did that. So credit to the Irish for that. And it's a tough pill to swallow for Kirby Smart and the Dawgs now, where you got a couple years here where you feel like, hey, man, we're supposed to have a stranglehold on the sport, and this isn't how this is supposed to go. So this is a very unique situation where there is no Georgia, there is no Alabama when we're typically sitting here getting ready to crown a champion. There's still – an SEC team in Texas, but, I don't think this is quite what people had cooked up when this playoff started. And I think in regards to your question yesterday about Notre Dame and Penn State, I just feel like everywhere I look now, people are crying disrespect over something, right, or not attention enough. So, I'm just not quick to go, like, you're not being talked about enough. You're being disrespected. I think for Penn State, you beat Indiana, right? Notre Dame, you beat Indiana. So not a lot of credit's going to be given to that because most people didn't feel like they deserved to be here anyways. Well, after last night, give them their respect. They went and beat Georgia, but I don't think you had to, fawn over the Irish after beating the Hoosiers and go, man, they're being totally disrespected. Now, though, I think maybe you open some eyes a little bit wider, and in the case of Penn State, I think they still have some proving to do for a lot of people just based on who they've played because they played SMU and Boise State, and before this thing started, I think the most commonly agreed to theme from the bracket was that Penn State somehow got the easiest draw of anybody to get to where we are right now. So give them a lot of credit as well, but I think maybe that's perhaps why you're not quick to just say, man, Penn State's deserving of more. I think because people are still like, they're good, but are they this level of good? And based on the fact they haven't beat a Georgia yet, you're like, well, they've got an easy draw, so they kind of – so I think that's probably where some heads are in regards to Penn State. But, hey, you go beat Notre Dame, you find yourself in the national championship, there's going to be no lack of respect heading your way, and that goes for the Irish as well.
Well, here, let's get to a couple of things. I love this tweet by John Wilner. We know John, he covers Pac-12 for years, now Pac-2, about to be Pac-whatever, and now also with what's in the Big 12, covers them. We've had him on many times. Just because Alabama and Georgia aren't in the semifinals doesn't mean the sport has completely flattened. National ranking of athletic department budget size public schools, according to the USA database, Ohio State 1, Texas is number 2, Penn State, by the way, is at number 9, so it's not as though they're not a big boy budget. Just in case you're interested, it is the two I mentioned, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, LSU, A&M, Florida, Penn State, and Oklahoma.
I don't know what this was in regards to, if it was like a straw man thing or if it was somebody's comment or whatever, but I don't watch sports to see who's got the biggest budgets.
No.
I don't give a damn.
What it's about.
His point was,
the point was, great question. The point was, just because Alabama and Georgia, who have won a massive amount combined of national titles, most of them Alabama, doesn't mean that college football is like dormant.
Right, but he's pointing out that it's not because there's big budget teams that are in it, but I don't watch sports because they've got the biggest budget, so I know what he's saying, but it's like, who's complaining about that, the sport's over because Alabama and Georgia aren't there? Well, a segment of fans that are never going to feel like it's not okay if they're not in there, so I think you're preaching to a very large segment, but for a lot of people who just love college football, which is everybody on this set right now, we don't care about the size of the budget or the background. And
Notre Dame can't be included because they're a private school,
right,
so they don't know the
and I'm sure theirs is pretty high up there. So, I mean, I get what he's saying, but I also think that's kind of just barking back at a crowd that you're not going to ever win over with anything that you have to say. And I don't feel in any way, shape, or form the sport has flattened because of who's in the playoff. I think if there's any air that's been let out of the tire, so to speak, which is, an argument that can be had if it really has or not. It has much more to do with not who's in the playoff, but what goes off outside of the field of play.
Yeah.
That's what takes some air out of the sport more than Boise State getting a shot at a title for 1 week, or you not having the number 1, 2, 3, 4 highest spending schools all competing for the national title.
I also think, though, that you do have a pretty large segment. Some of it's in the media that, like, Alabama's got to be in, or Georgia's got to be in. They're gone. They're bye-bye. Now we work and focus in on the 4 that are in the semifinals.
I think that the 12-team playoff, in with all the latest changes in college football, has shown us that it is about this year. It's not about your history. It's about right now and who's playing well right now, which is what most sports are about.
And it's not about what you did in the first month necessarily. It's about who's playing the best right now at the end of the season.
If the Commanders win the Super Bowl this year, I'm going to ask, look, you laugh, but okay, they're one of the best teams in the NFC. They're in the playoffs. They've got 10 wins. They've got one of the most exciting young players in football. Look, the NFC is a little bit wide open. Yep. So if they go and win the Super Bowl this year, will you guys, the 3 Commanders fans in this room, give 2 hunky dumps that they lost to the Cowboys randomly in October?
Or maybe even this weekend. No,
you won't. You won't care. So I think Ohio State is a nice little microcosm of this, of like, it sucks to lose to your rival. It sucks. But if you get to turn around and then look at your rival and hold the trophy over them in spite of you beating them, that kind of makes it all better. You'll forget. And, like, it doesn't make the rivalry any less weighted, but it does give you a sense to, like, not put all your eggs in one basket, in that the whole season means something and not the parts of it that we think should matter more. It's about the entire tapestry and not just parts of it. And I think that is becoming clear to a lot more people. It will be a slow burn because, the big dogs have had a 20-year propaganda lead on this.
Not just
some
propaganda.
Of it's propaganda, but results.
There's evidence.
But also they were able to have those results because the people in charge kept it a small group, right? So it was really hard to crack into 2 people and 4 people than it will be to crack into 12.
The good news about the 4 teams that are part, this is newness. A lot of new here, even though they're all what you consider blue bloods. Texas's last national title was in 2005. They did play for it back in 2009. Notre Dame had not won a major bowl game in 31 years. They haven't won a national title since 1988. Penn State has not won a national title since they stunned Miami in 1986 in the Fiesta Bowl. And Ohio State, they did win it the year they slipped in when they had the 3 different quarterbacks and won the national title in 2014.
So nobody's won a title in over 10 years.
10 years, yep.
So, I mean, I think that's awesome. Kind of a sign that the playoff might be working to some degree, is that you've got something that's so wide open. And I don't think there's any of these 4 teams that go like, oh, that's the easy pick. I mean, do y'all have somebody? I don't think there's anybody who's go like, oh, they're getting ran over. They have no chance.
Like, Ohio State's playing the best overall football right now. But Penn State, like, even if you look at the Oregon game, they played really well against Oregon, a lot better than I thought they were going to. Now, they've been the least tested of all these, I guess. But, I mean, everybody has their strengths that could counteract somebody else's. In this 4. It's a really good 4.
I wish my team had a chance to ever get back to that. I'd love it because that means you've won at least 2 games, maybe 1, and about to play for a chance to play for another national title. So there's one note of history, Notre Dame's first major bowl win. Think about that, in 31 years, and also the last national title among those left, Ohio State, back in 2000 and also 14. There is the Marcus Freeman note, by the way, from Notre Dame. Do you know if Notre Dame happens to win, which that doesn't mean they will, and if Ohio State wins, he played at Ohio State. So there's a little bit of a tie-in that might get down the road if they end up playing each other. Here's from J.J. Joe, former Baylor quarterback and also radio analyst. The bell cow, holding on to the SEC as a former Big 12 conference team in year 1 in the SEC. Now, Texas was really good last year, in fact, almost great. But it is interesting that they're the ones now holding up the spot for the SEC in the semifinals.
Yeah, I love JJ. I've seen this point made 1,000 times in like the last couple of weeks when the races have been going on well, it's a Big 12 team that's carrying your water pail. And again, I get so sick of the conference tribalism stuff, which is the most extreme it's ever been because of the environment that's been created and how conferences are rewarded for having multiple teams in the playoff, and fan bases now are more conditioned to understand payouts and how important those are for NIL and rosters and TV money. And so we're so into the weeds on that, so it's created that situation. But I understand the point, though, and why it's been brought up over and over and over again is because Texas was not supposed to be playing for a national title in year one because they were going to come to the big, bad, mighty SEC and play real football, right? And have a season probably more like what Oklahoma experienced, although Oklahoma still made the postseason. But, yeah, I mean, Texas isn't a Big 12 team, though. So I get the point that he's making, and I have seen that point made by quite a few other people, much like when, I guess before Ohio State kind of got hot, it was Oregon's carrying the Big Ten, right? So you had that and all the discussion about the teams that have moved around. But, yeah, it's not mighty Georgia or mighty Alabama. It's Texas there in year one, who's the last team standing out of the SEC.
And that feeds nicely into this next one we have for Mike Craven in that Texas is the only SEC team standing in year one. A&M won 11 games in their first year in the conference. Mizzou won 12 games in year two and 11 in year three as SEC members. It's all propaganda. And, yeah, it is because, I agree with this wholeheartedly.
It's not all propaganda.
No. Here's where the SEC propaganda exists. The SEC propaganda exists among beyond who the best two teams in the league are any given year. Because they're saying, Lane Kiffin's up there saying, it's not comparable like the NFL, the SEC, and everybody else. It's not that. It's the NFL, Alabama, the NFL, Nick Saban's top protege, and everybody else. That's where the propaganda really worked, was they convinced so many people that it wasn't just an elite LSU team, an elite Alabama team, 3 elite, super elite Florida teams.
Arkansas is not your average 4-loss team because they play.
That's
it's come on, man.
Yeah. Alabama's not propaganda. Alabama earned all of it. Georgia earned it. LSU's earned it 3 times. Urban Meyer in Florida won back-to-back titles. And then they only lost the SEC championship game the next year. That was an elite run. But Nick Saban essentially, cut the Gators' nuts out when he came in, and that was the end of their run. Nick Saban's run was unique, but we give a lot of credit for the entire conference to Nick Saban, which then takes away from Nick Saban, because what he was doing in Alabama was unique and unbelievable. And then for Kirby Smart to come along and dethrone him was really, really impressive too. But it has nothing to do, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Missouri, A&M, none of them did anything to help this cause. That's where the propaganda comes in. That's the propaganda.
There's the bubble, the SEC bubble, as we've talked about. But you know what? If Texas wins it, they get another national title. Not only Texas, but also the SEC. Ohio State is from the Big Ten. Notre Dame is an independent, and obviously Penn State from the Big Ten. So 2 Big Ten, 1 SEC, and 1 independent. Business models. Garrett, do you have the one about how each team, I don't know if I gave that one to you, each team that has moved into the semifinal has compiled $16 million. Not by themselves unless you're Notre Dame, because they are by themselves. The conferences that they represent have picked up $16 million for each team that is in the semifinals, which also means the Big 10 has a couple of teams, so they have double that amount. Dave Bartu, he's been beating this drum. By the way, Mack Brown's going to join us today. Former Texas, North Carolina, Tulane head football coach at 4 o'clock. He'll join us today at 4. So he has been beating the drum, and I've not always quite understood it or even agreed with it. Quarterfinals, Texas had no top 25 wins. This is prior to the college football playoff. Arizona State had 3. Ohio State had 2. Oregon had 4. Bottom line is the teams that won had less top 25 wins this year than each of the teams they beat. Notre Dame 1, Georgia 4. He goes, I know no one's listening, but I'm going to continue to beat the strength of schedule drum to keep it in its current and rightful place. He has said, don't always look at the norm of strength of schedule, top 25 wins. It comes down to, here's another graphic from Dave Bartu as well, of what he did. The team with the best scoring efficiency, 4-0. Team with the best total scoring efficiency, 4-0. Team with the best high school recruiting, which we have discussed this, 3-1. Team with the most top 25 wins, 0-4 from the quarterfinal round. Strength of schedule is a good tiebreaker. All other arguments for quality is worthless. And he's talking about what we may say, well, they haven't won a top 25 game, or they've got a 3-1 record, or they're 0-4. It doesn't really come down to that unless it comes down to that being used when there's a tiebreaker.
Well, yeah, and look, the point is that, and Texas is a great example of this. Texas looked like they had a really, I mean, they had a middle-of-the-road SEC schedule when you looked at it, but then, you know, Michigan decided that they were going to try to do it without a quarterback. And, you know, they didn't really figure out who they were until the end of the year. So that win looks better now than it did early on, but like that, even still early this season, they trotted out a walk-on as their starting quarterback game one. You know, that everybody thought that there were going to be some other better teams in there, or that, you know, some of these things would be, you know, Oklahoma would have been better. They weren't. But that, like, none of that's Texas. It's not like Texas went there and, you know, sabotaged them. It's just those teams weren't as good. So it's not Texas's fault that their strength of schedule, they didn't have any top 25 wins. They had one loss going into it, or two losses going into it, both to the same team that were in the top 25. So I don't know what it really said about them other than Georgia had their number, but no one else did. So, you know, when you look at all of that, like, I think that sometimes the strength of schedule can get, like he said, overinflated.
I mean, everybody was bemoaning Texas didn't have a great strength of schedule. So the fact that they're in here, I think, has proven that maybe who they played and how good are they really because of who they played was a bit overblown, that they were still a very good team despite what the schedule might look like. I think the biggest problem with strength of schedule is the conversation around the top 25 and how all of that works and how all of that sets the table for a lot of things, and how that basically puts the players in motion before the ball's even rolled out for the very first game of the season. And BYU is an excellent case of looking at the top 25 rankings and or the Big 12 and how there was a lack of respect there, especially early on, that maybe did cost some teams later on when it came to where they were in the conversation at the end of the year. But yeah, I don't know. The strength of schedule thing, I've seen him make a lot of those points. It's a valid argument to be had. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on it other than I don't trust the top 25, like, to just point to that and act like that's some exact science when we see it every week and we know the massaging that goes on in those polls, and we know the way, like, strength of schedule remains strong is how you never seemingly lose the amount of teams you have in the poll, because one drops out one week and you gain another one, and just always gets replaced, basically. So it works far better for some leagues than it does others, and props him up maybe a little bit more than it does others. But, yeah, it's an inexact science that can't be trusted solely on you just beat top 25 teams, so you deserve this, versus they didn't beat as many, so they're not as good. Like, it's just not that black and white.
Roll Tide Roll in the Super Chat. 20 years, look how many teams have won natties. No other conference comes close, discussing the SEC. I think we just absolutely discussed that. No one's complaining about the evidence. What we're talking about is sometimes how that evidence is then followed into who should be playing, who should be ranked, who should be in the playoff. And, Scotty B said, no matter what Dave Bartu says, college football matrix, no teams with 3 losses should have been in. The only team that was in with 3 losses is Clemson, because they won a conference title and they were at number 12, so that's why they got in. None of those teams with 3 losses got in other than one that won a title.
And to clarify my point on the SEC propaganda, the SEC propaganda wasn't about Alabama, Georgia, LSU, those teams that actually won titles, earned their spot. The SEC propaganda is that we play in the league with Alabama, so we're naturally better. No, you're not. No. Again, let me make it simple. That's like saying if Smokey does an extra 30 minutes at the gym, he can give that to me as my calorie burns. No, that's not how it works. Smokey benefits Smokey, Paul benefits Paul, Craig benefits Craig. So whatever we do benefits us. And you saying, riding the coattail of Alabama or Georgia or any other SEC team and saying the whole league is better, well, what has Mississippi State done to earn that other than one time with Dak Prescott beat Alabama? Like, you're a trivia question. Yeah. That's what you are. You're not a national champion. Those teams are the national champions. You guys are just like everybody else. And guess what? It's okay. There's only one champion at the end of every year. So being like everybody else is fine.
Yeah, there's a lot more to get to, a lot more to discuss. We're going to get into the bowls. There are still 3 bowl games remaining. We will have that for you, too. And then, of course, have our guests, including Grayson Grudhafer will join us at 3:40. Mack Brown will join us today at 4 o'clock. There was one more note. Oh, by the way, I said $16 million. Every team that made the college football playoff semifinal will earn $14 million in payouts for their conferences, not 16. Notre Dame, of course, will get it all by themselves. Where is the one I have about Notre Dame and their transfers? There was an article on ESPN.com after their win about Notre Dame and their transfers. It wasn't as if that's why they won, but look at who they had, who they got in the portal. Their quarterback, who's fantastic, Riley Leonard from Duke. Defensive end, R.J. Oben made a big play early, Duke. Jaden Harrison, kick returner, touchdown, Marshall. Bo Collins went to Clemson, wide receiver, a part of the thing, and Mitch Jeter, their kicker, from South Carolina. So when they got in the portal, they, like others, not everybody, found those kind of players that could help them not just win, but win that specific game too against, of course, the University of Georgia.
Yeah, Marcus Freeman and staff have done a fantastic job of building the roster and filling in their spots. R.J. Oben, really, really good player. I'm glad that people kind of got to see him last night. And I think everybody knew Riley Leonard. The best thing that happened to FSU last year in their pursuit of 13-0 is that Riley Leonard hurt his ankle. Otherwise, that game probably ends with a loss for FSU because he was controlling the game. And you take his ability to motion out of something, he's just so tough and such enthusiasm that he's a difference maker. So yeah, they really made it stick. Georgia had some good ones too. Just when you're in the situation like they are with an offense that's just kind of ho-hum, there's not much you can do against a team that's just so ridiculously physical and outside of penalties, mistake-free.
All right, Craig, put a bow on the 4 semifinalist teams. We'll have a couple more things to do. Anything else to add to it?
No, I just think it's great to have this playoff playing out in front of us, and while everybody wants to pull their hair out at every perceived slight or thing that doesn't go right, I just want to remind everybody it's the very first year we're doing this. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It won't be perfect. It hasn't been perfect. It will get changed. It will get changed in the next couple of years, and it will be probably a more fluid, better seated, whatever your complaint might be about this thing, operating framework for crowning a champion as we move along. And you get more experience and evidence on how this all could better work. But for all of the complaints that I've seen about this or that, I've enjoyed it. The games could be better in some cases, but that game turned out to still be pretty entertaining in a lot of different ways last night. Even though Notre Dame controlled a large portion of that game, Georgia still found ways to make it interesting. Gunnar Stockton's clearly a talented player. And so, it's just interesting now to be down to the Final Four and only have these 3 games left outside of the 3 bowl games that are still going on this weekend. But, that was a fun game to watch. Good weekend overall. But still, a lot of tweaking to do. This is far from a finished product, this expanded college football playoff. And I just think people need to remind themselves of that when we act like this is, life or death sometimes. Like, this is still a fun thing and a hobby, and it was fun to just watch this playoff play out, even though it's not perfect right now.
There were times when they had AP and UPI, then it became the coaches poll. You had split national champions. Life moved on. You could argue about who would have won. Doesn't matter. Both teams got a national title. They moved on. It's great to have one, but I think sometimes we forget about just the fact to enjoy the ride, even if it's not a team that you like that's a part of it. How about this story about Indiana quarterback
How about this? There's none of these teams I would have rooted for to be in this playoff, but I'm damn sure intrigued by it. I don't want to. I know there's a lot of people that don't want to see Notre Dame raising a national championship trophy, or see Texas raise a national championship trophy, or Ohio State, or whatever. But you can't say they're not intriguing teams, and you can't say they're not the 4 best playing out, because they've proven it on the field. They weren't selected by a poll after their conference championship game and said, you're playing for the title. Like, they've all had to, at this point, earn it in some form or fashion. And so that's been interesting to see, and I think it's also interesting the conversation that's created about the top seeds and the buys and how all of that works. And so that's kind of what I'm pointing at as well when I talk about the tweaks that will continue to be made. But I think it's a super interesting Final Four, and I think when you look at the droughts of the national championships, the fact we'll have a natty champ for the first time celebrating in the earliest a decade is a pretty cool break from what we've seen for the last 10 years, where it's been so much Alabama and so much Georgia. It's going to be somebody brand new that we haven't seen winning the trophy in at least a decade, and that's pretty cool.
All right, how about this story about Indiana quarterback Curtis Rourke, an NFL draft prospect, had a great year for Indiana in their run to get to the college football playoff. He will undergo ACL revision surgery, per his agent Casey Muir, at Octagon Football. Believed to have re-torn his ACL as far back as in August before the season began. Played and led the Hoosiers to a playoff. He also had that finger injury he suffered against Nebraska. Missed part of that game, but there was a blowout. And then also, I think, missed one more. He played through that. And toughness, and that's kind of a note about what he dealt with as they had a special year in Bloomington.
They build him different in Canada. When you cut him, he bleeds maple syrup and Labatt's. But
he's super passive aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I just looked up. I had never heard of ACL revision surgery. That's what they call when the reconstruction doesn't work, they revise it. So basically, his first knee surgery was the rough draft, and this is the final copy, hopefully, for Curtis Rourke. But, man, I remember Stan Humphries tore his in a playoff game one time and was hobbling out there for the Chargers. I remember thinking, like, man, that's really tough. Phillip Rivers, same thing, and finished the game. But to play a whole season of it, wow.
Yeah, it's impressive toughness, and he's a really good player. Followed him when he was at Ohio the last few years, and didn't expect him to help lead the Hoosiers to a playoff berth by any stretch of the imagination, but they just had a magical mix of ingredients this past year that led to this new version of Indiana football that kind of set the world on fire there for a little while, and it got doused in the end, but they've still got a very bright, optimistic future post Curtis Rourke, in large part because of what he helped lay as far as the foundation goes for this new era of the program. So best of luck to him and his draft preparations. And yeah, that's a lot of toughness shown this past season. So good on him.
By the way, we appreciate all of you who are watching or listening in any way you can, whether it's on YouTube and 365 Sports, also on the app, Sikkim 365 app, and then even on Twitter at 365 Sports YT. We had a long break. We came back and did a show Monday afternoon, did a pregame show for Baylor and LSU on Tuesday, did a show yesterday, did it early, and then played it back again. We went live early and then played it back again during the Sugar Bowl, and today back in the studio for the first time in forever and on until 6 o'clock. Here's a note. How about this uniform from the Georgia player? If this was a dress in public, it would be someone would be arrested. This is just what's going on with knee. I know knee pads are out. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's a lot of, my mother-in-law, we were watching one of the games last week, and she goes, why are they wearing shorts? I don't like this. Yeah, I guess if he has knee pads in, but they're up near his hips, and his hip pads, they're so small.
Well, they used to be thigh pads.
Yeah, and like up near his thigh, like it's very weird. I know that I played in the era of you had to stand in a line, and the referees before the game in Florida, they would come and check your pads, which I thought was kind of a weird thing because they would goose you a little bit. But I'm not traumatized by it or anything. But yeah, I had the big clunky pads that went all the way down, almost to my shins.
Yeah, you could take a hammer and hit them against your thigh. They were enough to absorb most of the pounding. But the knee pads are gone. That's as high up the leg as I've seen it in any time at all. And of course, hey, it's your body. You play with it. A lot of it's about speed and also agility and mobility and much more to be able to play the way that you want. So there we are. We will get into Brett Yormark, Big 12 commissioner, his thoughts about the targeting rule and wanting to discuss that. We'll have that today at around 4:45 or so, and also look back at the Big 12. And now that Arizona State is out, we'll look at the overall bowl schedule and also results for the Big 12 over the last 4 or 5 weeks. When we come back, Grayson Grundhafer, Sikkim365.com. Thank you for your time. As I mentioned earlier, this is 365 Sports. PettyClinicLOT.com. Dr. Ken Petty can help you become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, and used to be. PettyClinicLOT.com. Contact them, and if you have any of these symptoms, your energy's not the same, your sleep habits are not the same, you've gained a little body fat, yet you eat well and you are fit, it's part of low testosterone that be getting in your body and creating some of this, or even ED and low sex drive. Dr. Kent Petty can help you find out if that is what is going on. Contact them on the website. They can set you up and will set you up with an appointment. Take care of that. Get the results, the blood results that you give your blood. They'll draw your blood. He'll look at the results. And if your testosterone level is too low, he can put you in a program to increase it so you can become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, used to be at PettyClinicLOT.com.
I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever, everything I like. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to it.
If you want quality and personalized service for all your air conditioning and heating needs, call Tradesman Services. They're a family-owned and operated company that has served Texans for over 30 years. Tradesman offers maintenance plans starting at just $12 per month and a free service call for all new customers. They're also experts in geothermal design, installation, and service. Visit them online at coolingwaco.com.
Customize your favorite ball from golf's top brands. For a limited time, take $5 off customization. Add your name or monogram, personal photo, or improve your game with a custom alignment aid. Available now at golfballs.com, the world leader in golf customization.
It's time to start something new at Allen Samuels. Drive into 2025 with huge savings on all of our Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram vehicles. From a trail-conquering Jeep Grand Cherokee, towing in style with a Ram Heavy Duty, or cruising the city in a sporty and luxurious Ram 1500, we've got the perfect ride for you. Stop by Allen Samuels in Waco, where we make car buying easy.
Come by. Let's be friends.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Mentioned Curtis Rourke of Indiana, what he went through, and having that revision ACL. There's a young man at Alabama, Jalen Milroe, and man, there were some moments when he was phenomenal, and there were some moments as well when you just didn't quite understand. Before we hit Grayson here in just 1 second, he's turning pro. I'm not surprised he's turning pro. I don't know how NFL scouts will look at him, dripping with talent. I sometimes wonder about what particular scheme would work for him, because we've seen other quarterbacks go into the NFL who may have been like him as far as not a polished passer, but has a gun, and what will he do?
Well, I think Jalen Milroe is a very fun and talented player that I've enjoyed watching a lot over the past couple of years, the ups and the downs notwithstanding. But, yeah, to see him go and declare for the draft, it just is a reminder that that's the time period we're now going to enter where we pivot from bowl season to draft season in a lot of ways, and excited to see who declares, who doesn't, what all that looks like. Obviously, we've already had a few guys, few of the obvious choices that have declared. And Milroe making it known, I guess, officially yesterday, Jihad Campbell, also of Alabama, their linebacker, declaring as well. But, yeah, I don't have the greatest hopes for Jalen Milroe at the next level. Like, he's not a guy that jumps into the number one overall pick conversation, certainly. I think the quarterback grouping is really kind of lacking past the tippity top, and so where he falls into that, I'm not quite sure until the dust fully settles on who's in and who's out. But if he was, I'll say this, if he was ever going to enter the NFL at any point in any era, this was the best time to do so. Like, his talents and what he's capable of doing, like the NFL and the style that's being played right now, he definitely can fall into that more than in previous eras. But, yeah, I don't know how he'll be viewed. And, you know, I'm interested, though, to just kind of follow that journey for him. But I think it's pretty clear, like, who the top guys are. And after that, you know, where does he fall in line behind Shador and Quinn Ewers, et cetera? I don't know, Paul. I mean, do you have a grasp at all on where Jalen Milroe fits into the NFL?
I don't. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback right now. But I'm not I'm not the guy who gets to make that decision. I think he needs to be open to where they want to put him, because I think that it's clear he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. That just might not be passing all the time. He's got a very strong arm. He's just not he's just not an elite passer. But he is an elite athlete, and he's really good with the ball in his hands. So the best place for him to go and the best thing for him to do is find a place, that'll use him like Taysom Hill or something, like use all the abilities that Jalen Milroe has, and not just don't try to make Jalen Milroe something he's not. Find out what he is and make him that. Make him more of that.
I think he's kind of an enigma for most people who follow the draft. Like, I don't think even draft nicks know exactly what to think of Jalen Milroe just yet. So he will be an intriguing player from that standpoint, because he's a big name from a big program. And a big spotlight's been on him these last couple years. I do think he's made improvements. Like, remember when we first watched him play quarterback and he first really got that taste a couple years back, and people were like, it's never going to last. And here he's been the majority starter for Alabama for 2 seasons. I think he's definitely shown some improvements in his passing game. But, yeah, there's still a lot to be desired there. So very curious as we draw closer to that, kind of what's said about him and where he might fit. But it was funny because I think most people thought the same thing of, like, Milroe's declaring early to, go do what exactly? And that led to a lot of Jets fans, Browns fans, being the self-pitying fools that they are because of what they've been dealt as fans for so long. Oh, yeah, we're definitely going to be drafting Jalen Milroe, aren't we? We're just going to – that would be such a Jets move, or maybe not so much the Browns. But, yeah, I mean, I've seen some jokes about it, but we'll see what he does. We'll see where he falls, and I wish him the best. My experiences – of just hearing about Jalen and people he's dealt with have been nothing but super positive, very well-liked guy, and so I'll be rooting for him. But, yeah, I just don't know where he fits in big picture. And he did have the opportunity to come back, but you can feel kind of where the timing was, it was right to make a move for all parties.
I don't know if he was better this year than he was last.
Fair.
Obviously, Alabama wasn't. I know he had the spectacular play last year at the end of the year, that win against Auburn on that incredible throw at the end of the game. But I don't know if he was better this year than he was last year, and you'd like to have seen maybe a little bit of improvement. It also could be the scheme that they're running compared to what he does best. We're now joined by Grayson Grundhafer, Stickem365.com and 365 Sports recruiting and football analyst. Grayson, thank you very much. What would you think about Jalen Milroe and what he might be able to do at the next level.
Well, guys, I actually have a great memory of watching Jalen Milroe in person, just covering recruiting. I got to see actually Katie Tompkins knock off Katie, I think for the first time in years, back when he was a senior at Tompkins, and he lit it up. It was really fun to watch. And then, of course, he goes to Alabama, has 2 really good seasons the past couple years. I think it's kind of like Craig said, it's an interesting era right now for the NFL. And I actually think his ability to run and pass is very intriguing. And, truthfully, I mean, if he could turn into something like Jalen Hurts, which I don't think he's quite had a season like Jalen Hurts did that final year at Oklahoma, but I also don't think he's really been in an offense that was as, dynamic. He also didn't play in the Big 12 and things along those lines. But I think Milroe could maybe fit in that way. And I'm sure an NFL team will take a shot on him, especially in an NFL draft that is kind of weak at quarterback. I like Cam Ward and Shador, but I do think that, after that, there's a lot of debate on who the next guy is.
All right, Grayson, it's the off season now for Baylor football officially after the Texas Bowl. And, the secondary was always kind of the thing. That was during the winning streak, it was all right. They've done everything to kind of overcome that. Have you seen them attack that portal-wise, and especially losing Corey Gordon? That's something that's not going to help them either, and not being able to bring back an experienced guy in this defense. But secondary seems to be the thing they have to improve at the most out of things they would like to do if they want to stay like they were and improve year over year.
I think when you're talking about this year's team, I think that's definitely the right thing to say, that they have to improve in the secondary. And I fully agree with that if you're talking about this year's team, there's a lot of improvement that has to go on there. But obviously each year's a new year. And so you look around at kind of the roster and you see how many wide receivers they're losing. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, that might be another area that they're going to have to address. But you are right. When you look at the kind of the body of this season and you look at kind of how this season played out, when they faced really good passing offenses that could take advantage of the secondary, they absolutely did. And Baylor really struggled in that area. And I think, some of it was safety play. And as we saw in this game against LSU, for instance, Devin Lemire didn't play, and he'd been a veteran guy. He didn't exactly have his best year this year, but still a veteran. And so you're missing him. They had to move some guys around because Corey Gordon wasn't there. So you saw DJ Coleman move to star, which I think is pretty interesting. And then, of course, Carl Williams played more safety than he had played all year, high safety, that is. And so I'm curious kind of if those become permanent changes. I think I could see Carl Williams playing cornerback again after doing that his freshman year, because they need someone to kind of make up for the loss of Lorando Johnson. I think through the transfer portal, they're probably going to add a cornerback as well. As we saw, they just need some more veteran guys in that room. And if guys aren't having good days, you can bring someone else in and feel confident about what they're going to give you. They absolutely need that. Now, as far as safety goes, they've already attacked the transfer portal a little bit there. Adding Tyler Turner from Oregon, a guy who was a former 4-star prospect, was, once upon a time a Baylor commit as well during his high school recruitment. He's coming back, and he's going to be a guy who I think sets up really well for them at the high safety position. He's athletic enough to do that. He could potentially play some star as well. He's just not the biggest. So you'd kind of be making up for some things when it comes to running the football and how you're going to address that. But as far as a coverage guy, he fits in fairly well there. And then you look over at Devin Turner, who they brought in from Northwestern. And I think he's one of the biggest additions they've made so far. You look at a guy who has great size, great range, has a knack for creating turnovers. I just think he's going to add a stabilizing presence to this defense. And if you look at Northwestern, how they've played, they haven't been good as a team, but defensively they were pretty good this year. And he was a big part of that. And then outside of that, you got Devin Bobby returning, and you need him to really take another step up. And I think we kind of saw that from him in the second half of the year, not so much in the beginning. So I think there's reasons for things, to seem a little more positive. But I also think there are some areas they absolutely have to address. And I think cornerback is one of them. And, maybe even take 2 cornerbacks if you feel that bad about the room.
So, Grayson, I think going into this game, everybody felt pretty good that's followed the Bears about their opportunity to get a big win against a very good LSU team. And, I know they had some guys, especially in the O-line, that were out of this game, but it's not as though they were just depleted. Like, let's not make it more than what it is, but they were losing some guys, so that just made you feel better. The way that game starts, especially after the pick six, you're like, oh, man, they might be in, like, a lot of trouble. Like, they may be, like, outclassed talent-wise in this game. And then by the end of it, it's very clear that they missed a lot of opportunities in this game and that they did compete despite those mistakes, and they probably let a big chance get away from them to get a big win. So what were you left feeling coming out of this game? I think missed opportunity was kind of the theme, but just what were sort of your thoughts about what you saw versus what you expected and then what it all resulted in?
I think the first thing is that Baylor's got to get better. I think there are areas that you can specifically look at and go, man, they need to improve this offseason. And, when you look at the secondary, that's one. I also feel like up front on the offense line, defensive line, I felt like they were good, but they weren't at the level that they had been during this winning streak. And I think part of that was the upgrade in talent that they were facing, especially LSU's defensive line. LSU's defense line actually held their own against Baylor in this game. Now you can point to the snap that went over Sora Robertson's head that was like a 30-yard loss. But I felt like in general, they did a pretty good job. And once you lost Bryson Washington, it made things a whole lot more difficult for Baylor up front. But I do think that's an area where you see this group kind of come together over the course of this season. I think you see them in the offseason take another big jump, but I would still add some talent there. And then you look at the defensive line. I felt like they were good, but again, it's one of those things where you're facing a offensive line that was kind of depleted a little bit. And not completely. Like, these guys are talented. Almost all of them were 4-star guys. They just weren't guys who had made massive contributions yet. And I think Baylor really felt the impact of Steve Linton specifically not playing because they were unable to get pressure on the quarterback at all. And so I think that's why you're seeing them really attack that edge position. They got to get better there because, Garmin Randolph had a really good game. But Garmin Randolph is not an elite pass rusher. And I think that kind of hurt them in this game, not being able to sub him out with Steve Linton at times to get some more, pass rushing production on the field. So felt like those couple areas were some of my main takeaways from a talent perspective. But I also feel like you're right. They missed a ton of chances. They had a ton of opportunities. As Dave Aranda said, it didn't feel like they were ready for the moment, which, it's kind of tough to say that. It's tough, I think, for Baylor fans to hear that they weren't ready for the moment. But I think it's also fair to just kind of, think about things and put it in perspective. I mean, this team was in the Armed Forces Bowl in 2022, and then they weren't in a bowl last year. So now they're facing a team that is really, really good, an LSU team that gives you an opportunity to really, kind of push through the ceiling a little bit and show who you are as a program. And they were unable to get it done, but it was for a variety of reasons. LSU did a lot of things right, but I just felt like, in general, Baylor did a lot of things to themselves that really cost them in this football game. Also, the Ashton Hawkins touchdown, which, I know has been debated a lot, and you can't point to one play that changed the complete outcome of a game because you also got to look at the snap that went over Sora Robertson's head, the roughing, the punter, play in which Josh Cameron returns it for a touchdown. I mean, there were just so many things in this game, 4th and 1s that Baylor just couldn't convert. There were a lot of things that went into it, and it made you think Baylor's just a little bit away from being that kind of team that can actually win these type of games and potentially win the Big 12. And that's where the transfer portal and recruiting comes into play, which Baylor's been really productive so far this offseason. A top 35 recruiting class with multiple 4-star guys. And then you look over the transfer portal and they have a top 25 class right now there. So they're doing the things they need to get better. But that's kind of how I left it. This team needs to get better over the offseason. And if they take that step forward, I do think there's a chance this team has a really special season in 2025.
I know that a lot of people get frustrated because of the way things are, and players opt out, those who might get drafted, those who might enter the transfer portal. But I got to tell you, and I was not able to ask Dave Aranda this in the postgame, the academics that got into play with players not being available. I can understand injuries, questionable, probable, out. But is that just where we are now? Who's to blame there besides obviously the student? What happens with that, Grayson?
I mean, I think Baylor is a little bit stricter when it comes to academics and when it comes to, following rules in general. I think Baylor's done a good job of that. And unfortunately, You look at it, and a lot of these guys were transfers and guys who only had 1 year left. And so it's like, how much did school matter towards the end of the semester? And that's unfortunate, but it's also the reality of things. And so, it was, when I got the alert and there were so many guys missing for academics, and then of course you got, Michael Trigg, I don't know, getting hurt in the lead up and then trying to give it a go in warmups and then just being unable to go. That was a tough loss as well. For Baylor. But of course, you look at the LSU side and they had all these opt-outs and things like that. So I'm not going to put it all on that, but I do think it's one of those tough things to see for this team, and the academic side of it. Really difficult because Baylor's actually had some issues with that for some reason over the last year with multiple players. And so now you sit there and go, okay, is there a what's the issue? What's the disconnect there? And so I think part of it is Baylor just being a little bit stricter. And I think, Baylor's going to adhere to the rules, and some schools don't do that.
Grayson, if you do, based on what Aranda was facing, what he was facing entering the year ended a lot better than it did the year prior, and even 2 years ago, too, when they went 6-7 and went into a free fall. How would you grade, based on the pressure on him, whether there was that much or not, how would you grade how he finished this year if it was on a regular scale of A to F?
I would give Aranda probably a B+ this year. And, I think you kind of got to look at it in a lot of different, aspects. But this guy decided that, in order for this program to have success, he needed to become the defense coordinator for this season. And we'll see if that continues. But I think that's huge of him. Like, to notice that, recognize that, say that's what he's going to do. Then to also just completely change his stance on NIL and how much of an impact that has had throughout the culture of this program, because, you had to do that. You had to make that change. They weren't getting the quality of player that they needed to because of, him not wanting to embrace NIL. And he has said that on multiple occasions. And so now, those things took a lot for him to admit that it was basically all on him for the reasons why things weren't going the way they needed to. And then, you go through the season and this team lost multiple close games to start the season. But the one thing we've always talked about with Aranda is the locker room and the players love Aranda and they'll play for him. And for them to start 2-4, knowing that Aranda is probably going to get fired if they don't turn this thing around, for him to not lose the locker room at that point, not only not lose the locker room, but have the team kind of just completely refocus going into that Texas Tech game off the bye week is special. And it's really, really special. You wanted this season to end, on a high note. So I guess that's the only reason I wouldn't give it an A. But I definitely would give him a B+. The way that he kept that locker room together, I think speaks volumes about the culture of this program and what he is building. Now, if they can just bring in enough talent at specific positions, you feel good that this team can compete and can win a lot of games once they get to that point because of the culture that Aranda has established during his time at Baylor. It was truly, I think, very exciting and eye-opening for a lot of Baylor fans. And I think, this was one of those things I think some of us saw, this team going to a bowl game this year, but the steps that they took forward towards the end of the season, I'm not sure anyone could have expected. And then you go into next season, you feel really good about the roster that they have, the guys they have coming back, and you found, a top 10 quarterback in college football with Sawyer Robertson. So I think there's a lot of reasons for positive momentum, but I think a big part of it is just simply the culture that Baylor has right now and the fact that these guys are bought in to Dave Aranda and this program.
We will have you on again, if you don't mind, in the next week or two to look at the entire conference and who's coming back. You mentioned Sawyer at quarterback, and there's a ton of them who are back in the Big 12, which makes it what could be a fun and interesting 2025, as if the Big 12 is not always interesting with the craziness from one year to the next. Grayson, thank you. Great job with all the transfer portal. I know there's even visits going on now, I think, or whenever they are. Appreciate your time, Grayson. Sikkim365.com. All sorts of juicy information inside the premium section, if you remember, inside Sikkim365.com and the premium section. He is a Hall of Famer. He has been a head coach, national championship head coach at Texas, most recently his second term at North Carolina. I love this guy. Mack Brown joins Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, David Smoak on 365 Sports. It's great to see you, Coach. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So, Mack, is your overall thoughts on college football? Either you grab it and you embrace it or you get left behind. You have seen all the changes. Is it almost to the point where it's just too much at one time?
There's been more changes in the last 3 years than my first 47, which is really amazing. And you think about it, the coaches went through COVID and players went through COVID, fans went through COVID, so we'd never done that before. And that was about 4 years ago. And then you have transfer portal and you have NIL, a lot of great things in both of those areas. But when they collide, and then you've got tampering and kids transferring 4, 5, 6 times, we're losing a lot of what we built college football for: toughness, fight through things, stay there. Your team that came in as freshmen will finish together, and your best friends are in your wedding. And I think we're losing all that, David, and that really scares me moving forward. But kids are getting paid. They should have been getting paid a long time ago. I got $15 a month for laundry money, and we thought that was the greatest thing ever. But kids are getting paid, but unlike the NFL, we don't have a salary cap. So kids are getting paid too much in some cases. And then coaches are getting paid so much, and athletic directors are giving them buyouts that they can't get out of. So that's confusing to everybody. But we just have to admit we've gone to an NFL model. And our guidelines aren't as good as the NFL. So we've got to get a salary cap. We've got to get more accountability with everybody. You can't just be calling kids. It's so tough that the Penn State backup quarterback found out the starter was coming back. So he wanted to transfer. He had to do it during the college football playoffs. Here's a great kid that was being utilized during the game, and he's not going to get to play for a semifinal for the national championship. And that's tough. Put the kid in a very tough situation. I saw a young guy at Oregon, that 5-star that had just committed there and gone to bowl practice. He's in the transfer portal. So I really wish we could have it where kids have to stay a year or 2 years at least, so they can't just run out of there the first time somebody gets mad. But if you didn't have the transfer portal, you wouldn't have Quinn Ewers at Texas. You wouldn't have Joe Burrow being the third-team quarterback at Ohio State, transferring to LSU and winning the Heisman Trophy. So there are a lot of great things for the backups that are working so hard, and they can't go ahead and play at another school where they can start. So I've got that. I understand it. But when you got agents involved, you've got tampering. You got them calling players on teams and saying, I'm going to offer you this much. And then you're in a negotiation. I talked to a head coach the other day about one of our coaches that he was interested in. He said, Coach, I'm trying to keep my team. So I'm negotiating with my players because everybody's trying to poach them. So until I can get my team stabilized and have retention of my roster, I can't possibly think about the next step. So college football playoffs are wonderful. These kids are fighting their guts out. The fans are loving it. These games have really been competitive. I can't wait for the next set of games. And kids are playing a lot more. Coaches are coaching a lot more in these games. If you think about the kids that are going to be in the final games here with semifinals and finals, they missed Christmas. They missed New Year's. They ended up competing during finals. They're going to be competing as they start the next phase here. When school starts in January, and some of them will opt to declare for the NFL draft while they're playing in the games because they have to by the middle of January. So a lot of things that we've got to look at. I don't like the transfer portal being right in the middle of bowl games and playoffs. I don't know what we can do. Maybe you said it after spring practice, but when you do, that means that a guy that wants to leave might go through spring, and then he wouldn't be there for spring for his new team. So that's one thing we've got to get fixed. We've got to handle the tampering. We've got to get a salary cap, in my estimation, so there is some parity. Right now, the teams with the most money are going to win the most games because they're buying the best players. And that's just what's happening. And schools that are committed to that are going to have a chance to win. And, David, the weirdest thing is just because you've got money doesn't mean you win. You still have to evaluate. You still have to get the right guys in your locker room, and you still got to develop them. But if you don't have money, you've got to be so lucky that you don't get people hurt, and your rival's probably not very good. And it's a crapshoot for those guys without money.
Mack, of everything I'm hearing, first I have one quick question. Did they give you that $15 in change so that you could use the machines, or did you have to do that on your own? That would seem like a kind of a pain of a step. And two, I would say that if you surveyed coaches, they're all for any kind of player empowerment that helps players out, whether that's money, more autonomy on their name, image, and likeness, and all that. I would think that most coaches were probably in favor of that a decade ago, but coaches are about structure. And for coaches to navigate in it, you need a structure, and that is the most frustrating thing, that it is just improv comedy right now, isn't it?
It really is. And when you talk about the $15 a month, that was for laundry money, quote. It was a check. and we all... No football player was going to do his own laundry anyway. Somebody was going to help him. Even if his mother came up for the weekend. But we took it for, you go to a movie, or you might get to take your date to a place to get a burger or something. But that was what the $15 was for. But we waited too long to change. And I understand that. And now with the revenue sharing, that's fair. Because the schools were making so much money, the coaches were making so much money. And coaches are making so much money now that it's really interesting to watch when a coach gets a buyout where you can't buy him out, and you did that because he had leverage. He was thinking about going to another school. Then the next year you want him fired. So we're in a crazy time with all this stuff. And it's interesting. We had a lot of talks about when we get the 75% for most football teams that are going to win in the fall for revenue sharing. How do you distribute that money? If you've got your left tackle and he's really good and he asks for $1.5 million, and if you've got this much money for your offensive line, you've either got to decide to keep your left tackle or go to the right guard and the right tackle, because you don't have enough money to keep all three. So coaches are really going to have to do a tremendous job of managing that, quote, salary cap as we move forward, because that's where we're headed. And then if you decide that that's your guy and you go with him and you give him $1 million of your $13 million, and then he gets hurt or he's not any good or he has a bad attitude, then you've screwed up. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on coaches to make the right decisions, to distribute the money properly for their locker room, and who to bring into their program.
As your time was winding up at North Carolina, how different was your day-to-day activities compared to 5 or 10 years before, and what you were spending your time on and the amount of time you were spending on certain things as opposed to maybe what you otherwise would have been doing?
You know, it's a great question. And for us, one of the problems is we didn't have NIL money. We had $4 million where the ones that were winning had 20. So we signed 26 kids 2 years ago and we didn't give them a penny. And then we started giving our freshmen about $35,000 a year. And one of the really frustrating things at the end, we had 4 recruits, and they would come in and say, "Coach, I'm committed, but I've got to go to this other school. They've offered me $600,000, and you're offering me $35,000 or none." We called it the family discount. We had a great culture and a great family and a great school, great academics, and then they'd say, "Coach, $600,000, man." And I would really sit there and say, "I got it." I think if I was you, I'd do the same thing. But I didn't deal with agents. We had a general manager and a collective that would do that. I told our kids, we don't have much money. We're going to be as fair as we can with what we've got. And really and truly, we say it's not about pay for play. It is 100%. If you play good, you're going to get paid. And who's got leverage? Right now, the kids out of high school that are coming in have more leverage than some that are on your team. And guys that are in the transfer portal, that's gone up maybe twice as much this year for those guys as it was last year. So that's why there has to be a cap that's just going to keep going. And I've talked to some athletics directors, and the ones that are being the most aggressive in NIL are the ones that are winning. And they've said, let's get as much money as we can. Let's buy the best players we can get, because at some point this rule is going to change. And there is going to be a cap. There's no cap now, so let's buy the best team we can get and give us a chance to win. And then we'll be so far ahead when the other teams start when it gets to be more parity, when we have a salary cap, that we'll be ahead because we've already got the best players and we've already agreed to pay them this much, and they can't. They'll have to grandfather that in.
Mack, is it possible for the rich to get richer, as you've mentioned, because of the money, the revenue, et cetera, and donors, et cetera, NIL, and yet the otherwise teams outside of maybe the top 25 or 30 are better and more competitive because they can get some of those that are leaving those teams? Is that possible?
No.
Okay.
I think the ones, David, with the most money are going to win the most games.
Okay.
As long as they still do a great job of evaluating and developing. And what we forget sometimes is sometimes the best players aren't the best team, it's the best chemistry. It's the best dynamics. So more than ever before, you need a coach that gets it. You need a coach that players are going to believe in, because there's a third party, there's agents, there's parents, there's more people in that young guy's ear than ever before. So they're going to have to believe in you. And I think that's what's happening. But the ones with the money that are doing the best job of evaluating and coaching are going to be the ones that win the most games. If you look at who's playing now, Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State have money. Georgia had money. The ones that lost don't have as much money. And that's where this crazy thing's going. We're really putting ourselves in a position, unlike the NFL, where their draft system makes them have more parity. We have nothing like that. And the one thing I'm worried about are outside of that top, let's say 15 that are paying, what's going to happen to the other schools? And then you start looking at, there are people on people's staff, guys that just sit there and evaluate group of 5 players and evaluate guys on other teams. And then the agent will call that guy and say, hey, somebody going to offer you $1.5 million if you'll leave. So that's where it's a problem. It's really, really hard for you to maintain your roster if you don't have money. And I don't blame the kids. We as the adults have put the kids and the coaches really in this precarious position. All of the coaches like the fact a kid can transfer. All of the coaches like the fact that the kids have more money. None of the coaches like the structure that we have with the portal, with the tampering, with the timing of the portal, and the fact that there are not limits on what you can pay.
Coach, I'm curious on your opinion as a guy who coached in the Big 12 for a long time and in the ACC for a long time. There was, and look, the SEC had a lot of national title winners, but there was a lot of push about how deep and great that league was. But really, I think that it's especially proven out now with more, it's not the same kind of parity, like you said, as the NFL, but more parity, more talent spread around, that there's not really anybody that's so head and shoulders above everyone. As a coach who's had to coach against all of those teams, what do you think about the real division of league supremacy, or is that maybe something more that the commissioners and leaders of each league say because that's what they have to do, as opposed to what the reality is of it on the field, on the grass?
Yeah, I think it's more year to year, day to day. Some are top heavy and have really weak teams in the lower levels. But really and truly, the SEC has done such an amazing job of marketing. When they say it means more, and they got videos out, and they talk about it all the time, and and they've had some great teams, and it is interesting now that Texas is the only SEC team that's left, and there's 2 Big Ten teams in the playoffs, and Notre Dame, so one independent. But I do think it depends on the coach. The coach has to be a fit. The coach has to like his place. And it's right now it's going to be very, very interesting because of realignment that we've looked at. You see that Texas and Oklahoma's moving to the SEC, and it looks like now that was a great move for them, where there was a lot of people questioning that before. But with the new TV alignments, there's a possibility that Big Ten and the SEC will make $90+ million. and the other leagues will make 40 to 30 million. And that's the disparity there just means it affects your NIL. It affects who you can keep as your staff. It affects everything and puts athletic directors at the schools with less money in a really tough spot.
Coach, as I'm sure you've seen or heard, the first edition of this expanded playoff has been very polarizing, very controversial in some ways, entertaining as well. Just curious from your perspective and however much you've watched, do you have any strong thoughts on maybe some of the conversations, not just what we've seen, but also the first round seeds, the fact that all the byes went 0-4, the home field and hosting, things like that will be tweaked moving forward. Just your thoughts on what we've seen and what you would like to see maybe moving forward.
Yeah. Number one, I think it's long overdue, and the playoffs are great. It's tougher on the players because they have to play 13 to 15 games now, but they're getting paid. It's tougher on the coaches. Coaches are getting paid more than ever before, and especially the ones that are playing in these games. But like I said, you're affecting the end of one semester and the start of the next one. You're affecting holidays. But this is an experience that these kids will remember the rest of life. Remember when we won the national championship, I asked Coach Royal after the game, what does this mean? He says, this means you've done something very few people have ever done. And he said, now, as soon as you walk out of here, they're going to want you to do it again. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And he's right. And we didn't do it again. We got cold hurt at Alabama and had our chance. But then you'd want to do a third one. So that's part of it. But I do think that conference champions should matter. But I don't think they should have automatic buys and be first seeds. I think that you should have your 12 teams, and some people think you should go to 16, but I don't think that matters that much. But I like 12. There'll be controversy over who 13 and 14 are. If we go to 16, there'll be controversy of who 17 and 18 are to get in. So that's not going to change. But I would not let conference champs have an automatic first bid and a bye because conferences are all different. I would definitely rank the teams on who is the best team 1 to 12. And I would also take into account strength of scheduling, because if not, then why not play an easy out of conference schedule? And we love the Texas playing Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we love that. So that's really cool. So let's don't reward people with weak schedules and take away those games. I think that will hurt who we are and what we're looking for. Secondly, I think you really got to look at it's kind of like a bowl game. If you're off for 2 weeks or 20 days or something, does that hurt you in preparation? Because Oregon, you start looking at the teams that lost. Georgia. So it is a little frightening for those that kept playing, and those that kept playing, the coaches have to do a tremendous job of handling their practices where they don't hit too much, they don't get people hurt, but there's something about playing and being successful with it. The other thing I would do, and a lot of people disagree with me, and I've felt this way for probably 20, 30 years, I would take the group of 5 and let them play their own national championship. Boise State was the best team in the group of 5. So let them go win a national championship. I would have a Heisman Trophy for them. I would have a Butkus Award for them. But let them play in their own league because they're at a disadvantage because they're group of 5. They don't have as much money. It's hard to recruit as well. And normally, if the team that's ready to play is going to play a group of 5 team, the skill guys may be similar, but it's really hard to get too deep, really good linemen at a group of 5 school, especially when people are tampering and poaching their best players every year. So I would rather Boise State have a chance to win the national championship instead of be proud to get in the playoffs, but probably not have a great chance to win when you're playing against a Penn State who has a chance to win the national championship. And then that would give another group of 4 team a chance to get in the playoff. But I've always felt that way. I would watch Memphis and Boise in a national championship game. I think it'd be fun and it would be competitive. And then those young people on those teams can think about, we have a 12-team playoff. So that means that the teams that were really good that didn't quite get where they wanted to still would have a chance to win a national championship. And what we're doing this for, we do it for kids. What's best for the kids? Well, it's best for those group of 5 kids to have a 12-team playoff where they all have a chance to win a national championship instead of their season's over, in my opinion. And then it gives another group of 4 team a chance to be in the playoffs to win a national championship. And I want to keep the bowl games. There have been some great bowl games, and they're fun. There's been some that are bad. At North Carolina, we were playing our 4th-team quarterback. I mean, that's tough. And then you have 3, 4 starters, 5 starters opt out on defense. And the same thing with some Duke last night played their at least 3rd quarterback. So he'd thrown 1 pass and played 5 plays in a game or something, had 5 runs against Dart, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So we're going to have some of those things in bowl games coming up. But I still love the fact that we have the bowl games and the ones that can't get in the playoffs. And because of money, there's going to be a lot more that can't get in the playoffs than can. So if you're at a program and you don't have a lot of money and you're not going to play for a national championship, then give yourself a chance to go to a bowl and have a good experience.
Mack, if you don't mind, when you were at Tulane, if you would have had a team that was 11-0 or 10-1 that ran the table and had a chance to maybe be a part of something bigger, would you have been okay with having your separate national title as a group of 5?
Absolutely.
Okay, I was curious. Yeah,
it gave us a legitimate chance to win a national championship because we were competing against likes.
Yep.
And that would be our goal every year, to win the national championship. And Tulane's done a great job. It'd be hard. They're looking to try to get to the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas and Ohio State and Penn State and Notre Dame, Georgia, they're looking to win the national championship.
Mack,
and I think that's where it's different. So, and the other thing, our game is about the kids and the fans. If we didn't have the fans, then we wouldn't have a game. So in my estimation, we constantly have to think about what is best for the kids. What gives them the best chance to keep this great game going? What motivates them? What lessons can we keep teaching them? I'm a little worried right now that some of them with leverage are getting money before they've earned it. And that's not the way we were all raised, but I got it. And I understand. That's why I want to make sure that we all have a chance to pay the ones that are playing the best instead of just the ones that have the best leverage. But also we want to keep the fans involved. And if it's a group of fans with a team that's not going to go to the playoffs and not going to get to the national championship, then let them have that goal of winning 8 games and go into a fun bowl and enjoying that bowl experience.
We've had G.J. Kenny, Jeff Traylor, guys you know incredibly well, who have talked about tampering and their rosters are getting raided. We've heard what Jim Mora Jr. has said this week. Is it verboten to turn somebody in who's tampering? Is that like maybe telling on somebody else in the mafia? And I'm not using mafia in that, you know what I mean. Is that something that would be blackballed if a coach did that? Will that ever happen?
The problem with turning someone in for tampering, because we had it happen, is that you can't prove it anymore because there's agents, there's third parties.
Mm-hmm.
And what is tampering? Did they call a high school coach? Did they call the parents? Did they have an agent do it? So you're not going to catch anybody. So you know who it is. We had an offensive tackle bought off our campus. He told us what they called. He told us how much money he's going to make. He told us about the contract. We checked it out. It was all true. We called the people and threatened them, and they took him. He started. So it doesn't matter. And then fans say, well, everybody tampers. And fans would say, hey, he's just griping because he's losing. So really, a coach can't win that. I love Jim, and he is absolutely right. The day after he said it, he had a player leave.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So he knew it. He knew it was coming. But again, what's the NCAA going to do? You've got to have a coach. They do it through the players on the team. Player might be a buddy. You've got to have a coach that's got text messages or phone calls that are recorded to that kid before you're going to get somebody in trouble for tampering.
And
any coach that's going to do that's dumb enough, he should be fired anyway.
That's just about to
Don't
say.
be leaving a trail.
Mack, I was about to ask you about Riley Leonard. I know you studied him, but last night he's such a gutsy player. You did not get to face him a year ago, I'm guessing, because he'd gotten hurt in that FSU game, and then after that was there. But you've studied him. You've played like Duke and North Carolina. Obviously, we don't have to tell people how much you guys don't like each other. But what did you think about Riley Leonard and that game last night and the kind of wrecking ball energy that he brings to the quarterback position?
Yeah. I'm a huge Riley Leonard fan. He took a quarterback draw against us when we were at North Carolina and went 75 yards, and we didn't have anybody fast enough to catch him. And that got my attention. I mean, I'm standing there watching him, and I'm screaming, and our guys looked like they were in running in mud, and that kid was just flying by us. But more than that, he's a kid of faith. He's tough as nails. He played at Duke after he had the high ankle sprain, and played on one leg some. So is he the perfect passer? Probably not, but they run it so well, and he's so tough, and he's such a great leader that he puts people in positions where they have to stop the run, and then it gives him opportunities to throw the ball. But I think more than anything else, you look at what Quinn Ewers did at the end of the game, winning the game with a 4th and 13. I mean, that's toughness. That's guts. That's having a tremendous amount of pride instead of pressure. And those are moments that he'll remember and we'll all remember for the rest of his life. Same thing with Riley Leonard. And he went to Notre Dame to win a national championship. And I'm sitting there watching him last night. And it's obviously been a good decision for him. And he has a chance to do that now. And when I looked at him, David Cutcliffe recruited him out of South Alabama. He was a basketball player. He was on a running football team. He didn't throw a lot, so he didn't have many offers. And David found him. And then as coaches do, David redshirted him as a freshman, then got fired. So he should have been playing him because he thought he had him for the future. But I think he is a great player, a better person. And just watching him, us studying him and playing against him, he is one tough sucker now. He is going to do whatever he can do to beat you. And you can't hit him hard enough to make him turn it down.
Yeah, he launched like John Elway for that first down in the win. Mack, how much does, when you saw that Texas and Ohio State would play in the semifinals, does that flash back to the amazing win that launched you to the national title and the win against Ohio State in Columbus in 2005?
It really does, David. It's so fun when they played SC. I was thinking about our game with SC, and when they played Alabama, got Colt getting hurt on the 5th play and Garrett Gilbert coming in. We still had a chance to win, but lost late. When I think about Ohio State, going to Columbus was so much fun. They hadn't lost a night game to an out-of-conference opponent. I don't think they'd lost in Columbus in forever. 106,000 or something, maybe the loudest crowd I've ever seen. I remember we were working out on Friday, and the band was down there taunting us and cussing at us, and I went down and talked to the band. They ended up being my buddies. So that was fun. Jim Tressel and I stand in the middle of the field, and we're talking about how similar the jobs are. And they really are. They're the same job. I said, yours is colder. But you've still got the same positives, the same energy, and the same issues. And then we won that game with an unbelievable throw from Vince Young to Lima Sweet at the end of the game. Mm-hmm. Defense played great. And I thought, David, the winner of that game would play SC for the national championship at that time. I think we both thought that. And I believe to this day, if they had beaten us, they would have played for the national championship instead of us, because it was two great teams. And then we come back the next year, and they thump us pretty good in Austin. And it was Colt's second game, I think. And then the unbelievable game we had with them with Terrell Pryor in the Fiesta Bowl, that 16 seconds left, and Colt hits Quan Cosby for the touchdown. So 2 of our 3 games that we won were unbelievable games. The other one, they kind of took over. So I'm going to go to the game on Friday. I can't wait to see the game. I think we've gotten it right here. We've got 2 of the best teams playing in Dallas, and it's going to be really fun to watch Penn State and Notre Dame. They're so physical, both of them, that it's worked out for the committee, and it's the first time the committee's ever picked for this, so it's new for them too. But we're Georgia playing last night with a backup quarterback shows you Notre Dame did a good job of stopping the run, and you have to make a young quarterback beat you, and it was hard. It was just hard for Georgia to move the ball, and then they make the mistakes in the kicking game in a couple of different areas. Because Georgia is such a great team. You think about it, they've beaten Texas twice. So it's going to be really fun to watch these next 2 games and see who ends up in the national championship, because it's usually the team that can run the ball the best and stop the run and has the best kicking game. Because this time of the year, the biggest difference in Group of 5 and Power 4 are linemen. Everybody can get skill. Everybody's got some guys that can run. Everybody can find a quarterback now, but the difference is the 2 lines of scrimmage, and that's going to be fun to watch in these next 2 games.
Kerry, you mentioned Quan Cosby. He's a good friend of ours. I did a radio show with him for a while. Mack, did you ever recruit anybody from a smaller town than Mart, or is Mart in that? Because Mart is very, very small.
Yeah, well, Quan's like an adopted son of ours. We absolutely love him. He is amazing. And it was funny. We recruited him. We signed him. He goes to play pro baseball. And then 3 years later, we recruit him and sign him again. And I remember, because his name's a little bit different, Cosby than Crosby. And Oklahoma kept telling him, he doesn't even know your name. I'm sitting there in my office, and Quan says, do you know my name? And I said, that's really an unusual request. I've been recruiting you for 5 years, it seems like. So, yeah, I know your name. And I gave it to him. He said, well, that's good. The coaches at Oklahoma told me you didn't even know my name. And I said, well, they know they're in trouble, and they're trying to figure out a way to keep you from coming to Texas. And that's the only way they could do is lie about it. So, but he's such a wonderful representative of Texas football. He's an incredible person, and I just love him, and we're moving back to Austin, and I can't wait to be able to catch up with him. He actually came to one of our games at North Carolina and brought some friends, so that's
awesome. Mack, I know we've had you for a long time. A couple of more questions, if you don't mind. Your career was good at Tulane, but it was great at Texas. And then obviously you mentioned the game against Alabama that didn't start well, and in the end didn't end well. And then eventually, time to move on, right? Change happens. It's part of the business, no matter what you did. Had you won that 09 game, would you have left Texas on your own terms? And at the same time, do you have any regrets at all about your time in Austin?
David, I said this at the press conference when I was leaving. The 2 regrets are I really hate that Texas A&M lost 12 kids in a bonfire. As a parent and a grandparent, every Thanksgiving I think about those parents and the relatives, because that I don't know sometimes why things happen in our world, and that shouldn't happen. And the other thing that I was incredibly tough for all of us is losing Cole Pittman in 2001 to a truck accident. So when you go back and look at things, those are things that change people's lives forever. And they're doing a movie about Cole Pittman now, and I can't wait to see it. But we lost a young player to cancer this year, and we watched him after 2.5 years just slowly die. So we all need to understand, when you've got your health and your family's health, you've got no problems. You've got none, because you wake up and your son's got cancer. All the other problems are unimportant. So I've learned those things over time, and that's really important to know. Would I have liked to beat in Texas Tech when we were number 1 out in Lubbock? Absolutely. And should we have played better? Yeah. Should we have coached better? Yeah, I got that. Should we have beaten Alabama? sports is really weird. If Colt had stayed healthy, I think we win that night because Alabama could stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. And we had Quan and Jordan Shipley, and we could throw the ball now with Colt. He was very accurate and he could run. And we nearly won with a freshman quarterback that I wish I had played more. But no, and 16 years is a long time, David. Spike Dike was a great friend of all of us, and Spike left Texas Tech after 13 years. And I said, Spike, why'd you leave? And he said, well, Coach, they tell me that you lose 10% of your support every year.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed 13 years. He said, hell, do the math. And I thought, I got it. That makes sense to me. And then I'd been at Texas 16 years. Sally said that's 4 presidential terms.
Yeah.
So based on Spike's analogy, that was right. And you get worn out. Texas is a fun job. It's one of the best jobs in the country. And after you coach there, it's hard to coach anywhere else because you have everything. And there's really no reason not to win all the games. And you're not going to, but you have a chance to do that. And DeLoss Dodds was an incredible athletics director. He helped so much. How do you stay there for 32 years? And now Chris Del Conte has done an amazing job with basketball, with all the other sports, and with football. It's amazing what he's done. And I'm just so impressed with him. And Sark's the perfect fit right now. He's got the balance between Nick Saban and Pete Carroll with mentors. They've been NFL guys. He's got the balance of coaching a year with the Falcons. He's been a head coach at 2 pressure places in Washington and USC. So I think he's the perfect fit at this time. And really and truly, David, I did kind of leave on my own because we were tired.
Right.
It was all down at the end, and I think it was best for everybody to leave. Then I went to TV for 5 years, and I missed the kids. I missed the game. I love the game of football. I love it. It's been a huge part of my life, and I love the kids that play it. I love the coaches, the high school coaches, the college coaches. I love what they do and what they stand for, and it's been such a huge part of my life. That's why I had to go back and do it one more time. And I'm ready now to be involved with football. I may go back and do some TV. I want to be involved with programs and coaches. But I don't need to be out there fighting at 73 years old in a program that didn't have as much money. They needed a new face there. And I fully agreed in both cases with it was time.
Would you take a job if they asked you to be the college football czar?
I don't think so. I wouldn't, David, unless I knew that I could make changes and I knew who was going to be working with me to make changes.
Right.
It's not going to be, we're not going to have a czar that matters unless the system changes. And we've got to have a system that can have change and it can have immediate change. And the NCAA has always been really slow in their process. And they've got so many different people. You'd have to cut it down with really smart people, and you'd have to make decisions and make them quickly. It's harder, again, with Congress because the laws are different. And you'd have to make sure that everybody was on board. And I just feel like we're going to have somebody to get the commissioners together that can work with the NCAA. When and you all live in Waco, Grant Taft's a dear friend of mine. When Grant was the president of the AFCA, and I was on the board, he was the head, the CEO, and then I became the president. He got things done. The American Football Coaches Association changed so many rules, got the 10 coaches approved, and got so many things fixed. When Chuck Ninus did the College Football Association, and he brought in the presidents, the faculty reps, the athletics directors, and the coaches, and we'd all meet together, and we would discuss things and make changes. And right now, we're all over the place. Who's running it? Who's making decisions? Why did we have all these things that we decided were good without understanding the consequences? You don't ever make a decision without understanding the consequences. And how do you fix those consequences over time? And that's why we're in a mess right now. And coaches are getting worn out because we say it. It's the Wild Wild West. There are no rules. When I talk to some coaches and say tampering, said, Coach, it'd take an idiot to get caught for tampering. For what I said earlier, well, how about money? You can give a kid any amount of money you want. There are limits on the NFL guys when they go speak. I could send Drake May to Charlotte to a car dealership, and they could give him a car and $1 million for taking pictures and standing outside. So that's just kind of where we are with this, and that's why we've got to get it fixed.
Hey, I love you, man. I appreciate your time. Always appreciate it. Only thing I didn't like is you always went into, whenever you played Nebraska, you had to just do what you did, and some great memories with Ricky in '98 and all all the things you did. Seriously, always appreciated you communicating with me. I know Sally's in the background. She's getting ready to cook dinner. She needs you to get off the show, and I know she's been amazing too.
No, Sally is wonderful. She is the best head coach's wife there's ever been because she cared about the kids. And when we first got married, she said, I don't care about the games. I don't care if you win or lose. Well, she found out that her husband was miserable if we lost. And she also found out that the kids were miserable. So she said, I get it. We need to be winning these games.
Hey, enjoy the game. Ohio State, Texas, and also retirement. And I know you won't just sit around because that's not who you are. We really, really appreciate your time today, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I can't stand retirement, but I will rewire.
Yes, there you go.
Do something else.
There you go. That's a great word. Rewire. Thank you. Mack Brown, Hall of Fame coach with us today on many issues with college football, from his own personal experience to what he thinks is best. Whether anyone will ever get to that point remains to be seen. Appreciate his time. We have Dan Hope, 11 Warriors, covers Ohio State. He'll be joining us next. Also, Paul sat down and visited with Jack Easterby. He is involved in a lot of things, including the game of college football, NIL, taking care of athletes, making sure their life is good, and so much more. And this is 365 Sports. Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace off I-35 is a great company. Dr. Rob Maxey had an idea. Hey, how about we offer human beings, you, patients, those who have chronic pain or pain that just all of a sudden has come up because of an injury, weekend warriors to athletes who are on scholarship or playing even in high school, or just you as you get older and your body starts to break down, and I'll raise my hand with that. They have state-of-the-art imaging machine. They charge $497 or less every single time for an MRI. I keep waiting for that number to jump up. It never has. From day one, it's $497, and the average is well over $1,000 for an MRI. So if you have chronic pain, if you've had something, maybe you've hurt your knee or your back, your shoulder, neck, whatever it is, and your doctor wants a better look and they suggest an MRI, they'll know about Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace at idealmri.com.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
When you work with a bank, you should expect the best of everything. That includes face-to-face personal service and the kind of community banking care that only comes from one neighbor to another. That's exactly what you'll get from the First National Bank of Central Texas, where you will know your banker works just as hard as you do. Once again, that's the First National Bank of Central Texas. Settle for nothing less than the first. Member FDIC.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected. Get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Bud Light. Enjoy the smooth, crisp taste of Bud Light beer. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
Dan Hope has always been a go-to when we really want what's happening with Ohio State football, and my goodness, they are on a heater after the wins against Tennessee and also the dominant win against Oregon just, 2 or 3 days ago. From 11warriors.com, Dan Hope joins us on 365 Sports. Dan, what happened from the absolute nightmare loss to Michigan at home to what they are now, which looks like what a lot of people thought from the beginning was the best team in college football?
Yeah, and it's certainly all come together here in the college football playoff for Ohio State, which, a lot of people were, doubting, this Ohio State team going into the CFP because of how poorly it played against Michigan, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. And it just seems like everything's clicked here in these last 2 games that, I think Ohio State learned from that Michigan game that it really needed to play to its strengths, that you've got the best receiving core in the country. You've got to get the ball in those guys' hands. You've got to really air it out and make those guys really the centerpiece of your offense. I think the offensive line with more time to work through some kinks after Seth McLaughlin's injury between the Michigan game and the CFP, I think has really come together and improved. And then, Ohio State's defense really, since that first game against Oregon, has been the best defense in the country. And that was something really, even in that Michigan game, the defense was great. They just didn't get much on offense. But, going into the CFP, the question was you start facing, more elite offenses. Will that defense continue to be as dominant as it had been? And that's what it's been so far in these first 2 CFP games. Certainly I think, even in that Oregon game, you look at the final score, 41-21, I don't think that's really even indicative of how good the defense was, because Ohio State was up 34-0, and then they kind of started playing, a little bit softer on defense to kind of lead to long drives rather than allowing big plays. So I think everything's just clicking for this Ohio State football team right now, and if they can keep it up, they've certainly got a good shot at winning it all.
Dan, what was that Michigan game for Ryan Day? Was that a bit of a wake-up call to – I think the criticisms of him the last couple of Michigan games have been that he coaches tight in that game and not anywhere else. They haven't been coaching tight these last 2 games. Was that maybe a bit of a wake-up call for him? Or because there are voices outside that just – there's Ohio State fans that are never going to love him. They might like him a lot if he wins the national title, but there's people that are never going to love him. But these last 2 games, what have you seen that's different?
Yeah, certainly. I think much more aggressive play calling the last couple of games. I think, the team's been playing a lot looser, a lot more freely than it did in that Michigan game. And so, I think, certainly it was a wake-up call to everybody. This is a season that, is really viewed as a, national championship or bust kind of season. And, coming off of that Michigan loss, not making the Big Ten championship game, this team was at risk of not accomplishing any of its major goals this year. And, really, if this team had lost in, the first or second round of the CFP, this season would have been considered an abject failure for Ohio State with all the talent that it had. And so I think there certainly was a recognition among everybody, coaches, players, you name it, at Ohio State that, after that Michigan game, they had to figure things out, and they needed to get to playing the way that they need to be capable of playing, because, this CFP is really their last chance at salvaging the season. And so far, they've played great. And, I think there's a lot of confidence now in what they have the potential to do.
Dan, Ohio State won that first 14 playoff. Now here they are, and they're in the Final Four of this 12 team. They've also had a couple meetings with their new conference mate, the Ducks, and so they've been in the midst of all this change this year. Just curious, what kind of spice did the realignment factor add to the Big Ten, especially when it comes to Oregon, in your opinion, and the expanded playoff ride so far for Ohio State fans? Just what if kind of these changes and being in the middle of all of it, has that added a bit of excitement? Is it kind of status quo? Just from your standpoint, what's it meant, if anything?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly just I think from a Big Ten in general, I mean, with what Oregon did this year, leading up to, that game on Wednesday, I mean, Oregon was the number one team in the country. They went undefeated. They led the way for the Big Ten to get 4 teams into the CFP. So I certainly think it's been a boon for the Big Ten in terms of, solidifying itself as one of the 2 power conferences in college football, to add Oregon, to add those West Coast schools. I mean, if you're the Big Ten right now, you're feeling pretty good. Like you're thinking, okay, if Ohio State can beat Texas, like we're going to have at least 1 team in the national championship game. We've got 2 teams left. The SEC's only got 1 right now. And so I think certainly for the Big Ten, I think adding Oregon into the equation, has been a great thing so far. And then, this playoff expansion, I mean, the reality is for Ohio State, I mean, one of my colleagues made this comment, and it's true. Like, if there's no 12-team playoff this year, Ohio State maybe has a new coach right now. Like, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, they miss the playoff in a 4-team world, and maybe Ohio State makes a coaching change. Instead, now Ohio State all of a sudden is the betting favorite to win the national championship. And so certainly playoff expansion so far has proven to be a very good thing for Ohio State in year 1.
Dan, they had a press conference with Ryan Day, Steve Sarkisian. I saw in your post that Sarkisian, clearly we're massive underdogs. Nobody's going to give us a shot, so we're going to need all we can to try to win this game. Texas and Ohio State are probably one of the handful of teams that can look each other eye to eye, and they're the same people in many ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 2 of the power programs in the sport, 2 of the most recession-proof programs in the sport, where every year you just expect them to be 2 of the best teams in the country. So, yeah, I think, to hear, Sarkisian describe Texas in that way, like they're, the plucky upstart underdog, is a little bit humorous. But, coaches always love, I think anytime you can play that underdog card, they love to do it. And I think, Ohio State, they were kind of doing that, going into the CFP of everybody's doubting us. I think it kind of helps fuel what Ohio State has been able to do here so far. And so now Steve Sarkisian's kind of hoping to do the same thing for his team of, hey, everybody's doubting us. We're going to play in our home state and everybody's picking the other team. And so I think he's hoping to use that as fuel for his side.
Texas will obviously have a home field advantage. They're in Dallas. Do you think after now this will be the 3rd game Ohio State will have played that the fans will, and there's a lot of them, will meet the moment in Dallas?
I think they will, because I think the excitement has really returned to this fan base. I mean, I think, going into that Tennessee game, obviously there's a lot made of how many Tennessee fans made the trip to Columbus for that game. And I think the reality was there were a lot of Ohio State fans who, maybe weren't eager to spend money on going to a CFP game going into that playoff because of what happened against Michigan. But I think the way that this team has played in the last 2 games, now you're starting to get a lot of Ohio State fans with a lot of confidence that this team could win it all. And so I think you are going to see certainly fans, making the trip for this game. I do certainly expect that Texas is going to have the home crowd advantage because you're playing it in the state of Texas. I think that would be very difficult for Ohio State fans to overcome, but I do think there will be plenty of Buckeye fans at that game.
What have you thought about what you've seen from Will Howard over the last season, looking back on, all the conversations surrounding his transfer in K-State and, just what he would be like, his game? It's obviously worked out well, Dan, but just in your estimation, how well has it worked out? What's it been like covering that young man?
Yeah, I think that it's certainly been, what they had hoped it would be. And honestly, I think exceeded my expectations for what he would be because, I think you knew this was a guy, he brought experience, he brought the intangibles, he brought that dual threat skill set, that running ability that they had lacked at the quarterback position the last few years. But for him to be as efficient as he's been as a passer was not something that I personally saw coming. And then, you just look at the Rose Bowl. He was making some throws. The touchdown throw he had to Emeka Egbuka was probably one of the best throws I've seen all year. And in college football in general. And I think, there's kind of all year, there's always still kind of been this little bit of hesitance with Will Howard of like, because of how good Ohio State had it at the quarterback position in recent years of C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins, that I think there's been a little bit of a hesitancy to kind of put Will Howard in that same tier. But the way he's playing, I mean, I think he's right now been exactly what this Ohio State team needed at quarterback. I think he's a great leader. I think he's passing the ball at a really high level. And, he's rising to the occasion. I mean, I think these last two games in the CFP, you could say were his best games of the year. So I think he's really rising to meet the moment here on the biggest stage.
What did Ryan Day say today? Anything that jumped out at you?
Nothing super groundbreaking that I would say. I think the big message I think he really wanted to, put forth, not only to the media, but just to his team was the idea of just because we played great in those first two games doesn't guarantee us anything going forward. And so I think, that's been the big message to his team here going into this Cotton Bowl week of we got to continue preparing the same way we have for these first two games. We can't get big heads now because of how well we've played. I think that's certainly the big message to his team of, we can't, just because we did these things great against Tennessee and Oregon doesn't mean we will do so against Texas unless we prepare the same way. And so I think that's going to be the big thing that Ryan Day and Ohio State needs to do is just making sure that these Buckeyes play with that same edge they so clearly had in these first two games.
Yeah, and that's very true because that doesn't mean anything. You got another 7 days or whatever it is, and Texas is really, really good. This is a collision course to me, no question. Paul, you have something else?
Yeah. Do you sit back and just wonderment that you get to watch Jeremiah Smith for 2 more full seasons?
It's incredible. I mean, I was talking about it with other media members after that game, and you think about some of the players who have just concluded their college football careers, whether it be Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty, Dylan Gabriel, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. I think you could say right now that Jeremiah Smith, of guys who are still playing college football this season, is already the face of college football, and he's going to be playing college football for 2 more years. So it's remarkable what he's done. I mean, you just think of the run that Ohio State has had at receiver in recent years with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. and how great all of those guys were. And it's like, this guy's even better than all of they were. So he's certainly a special player. He's certainly been so much fun to watch.
X's and O's. Last thing, Dan, and we appreciate your time and enjoy the next few days and maybe even a couple and a half weeks if they get to play in the national championship game. X's and O's. UT couldn't run the ball against Arizona State. They have gouged some people. They ran the ball just well enough against Georgia, but not nearly enough. Ewers was phenomenal. And then their defense just runs to the football. They did give up a lot of yards to ASU. Your thoughts about the matchup itself? Have you had time to look at that?
Yeah, I'm still just kind of getting started with it, getting back from, traveling back yesterday. But, I think this Texas team, like you said, I think, one thing that I thought was interesting listening to Steve Sarkisian today was he got asked about the idea of with the run game struggles, do you need to lean more into your passing offense? And he was very big on, no, we need to keep with the balance, cited how good Ohio State's pass rush has been recently in terms of the importance of establishing the running game. But the reason those comments stuck out to me is because they sounded very much like what Ryan Day was saying around the Michigan game. And then we've seen in the CFP, Ohio State really kind of lean on that passing game, and it's worked to their advantage. So it'll be interesting to see, how much Texas really goes with what they're saying of, no, we still got to really emphasize balance, or do they try to lean on that passing attack more? Because I do think they're going to have a better chance of, making big plays through the air than they are running the ball consistently against this Ohio State defense. But I think, if you're Ohio State, you just want to keep doing the same things you've been doing. I mean, if they can continue to put pressure on the quarterback, if they can force Quinn Ewers into making mistakes and they can stop the run, I think, Ohio State's going to have a really good chance especially with what it's been doing on the offensive side of the ball the last 2 games.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time. And Happy New Year, Dan. Appreciate your time and enjoy the lead up to what should be one hellacious game in Arlington, Texas. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, certainly should be. Thanks so much, guys.
Dan Hope, 11 Warriors right there at AT&T Stadium, Ohio State, and Texas. And we'll have much more. I think I'll try to get in touch with Juan Cosby. He was a part of that game. Mack Brown mentioned it when they won a bowl game, when Terrell Pryor was at Ohio State. We'll go back to a couple of the oldies but goodies as far as players that were a part of those particular matchups. Notre Dame and Penn State, to me, are almost identical. Looks like they're almost the same team, and they're not quite that way, but that's a great matchup, too, and we'll discuss that along the way throughout next week. Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State head coach, in the postgame on the 4th and 13, I had mentioned about how I was surprised that they gave up the look so quickly, and you got to give Quinn Ewers so much credit because he called out of it. And then it was a quick throw on the touchdown pass to Matthew Golden. Otherwise, we're talking Arizona State and Ohio State. He went on Twitter today and he said, I want to reiterate my post-game comments about the 4th down call. I called it. I wanted to bring essentially zero blitz that plays out like cover 4. Our safety is taught to catch intermediate routes. The ball should come out fast. He did exactly what we coached. That play is 100% on me, not him. And I want to make sure that 100% clear we would not have been in this position without X. He was one of the most instrumental pieces to our season and program because some of the heat for giving up the touchdown pass.
Look, sometimes you just get beat. I mean, it's happened. Look, Matthew Golden's fast, right? I mean, so sometimes the other fast guy wins, and they took a chance. Ewers got him, and that was it. Like, I don't know why you have to get on the kid about it. Like, again, the coaches called the all-out blitz, and look, if it worked to the effect that Matthew Golden was a foot away from the ball, nobody would be saying anything, right? Mm-hmm. So just didn't work. That's all it was.
Yep, and it was a great call by Ewers to check out, which he gets credit for that too, and Golden had a special game in that one for, of course, the Longhorns. All right, Paul Catalina sits down with Jack Easterby, involved with many things. He, of course, was a part of a front office, a general manager's position, I guess you could say, with the Houston Texans. Did not work out at all. Paul had a chance. He's been trying to get in touch with him, and he did. That's coming up around the corner. Plus, of course, in about an hour or a little less, Paul Catalina and his top 5. And this is 365 Sports.
The biggest pre-owned sale all year is going on now at Richard Carr, the pre-owned green tag savings event. And they have too many used cars and trucks on the lot. They want to get rid of them. Every one of them are green tag price with big savings, so you can save green, save cash at Richard Carr's expense and help them clean up this lot full of vehicles that they want you to be driving in, and they want you to have that peace of mind and that security of driving in a new vehicle. If you are somebody who is not only maybe looking around, but somebody who's in need of a new car, now is the time to take advantage of that. If you're looking for a new GMC, Buick, or Cadillac in particular, you can find big end-of-year savings going on now at the Richard Carr Holiday Savings Event. All 2024 cars and trucks price to sell. 2024 cars and trucks price to sell. For example, right now you can save $8,000 on a 2024 GMC Sierra SLT truck. Plenty of those in stock. AT4X Sierras and four-wheel drive versions have even bigger savings. And Costco members, if you happen to be one of those, can also save an additional $1,000 off the already public markdown. So Costco members, you get an extra little bonus there. Of course, contact them for more details, but right now, GMCs, Buicks, Cadillacs, and big end-of-year savings going on right now on all 2024 cars and trucks, so take advantage of the excitement and the deals going on right now as we kick off the new year. It's the most wonderful time of year still, and if you want to save on a new car or truck, that's especially true. Take advantage of the big end-of-year savings. Check out richardcar.com or go see them in person off Highway 6, the Imperial exit.
At Edward Jones Financial Advisors Ben Erlinson, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott understand these are difficult and changing times we live in, but they know how important your financial investments are to you. So is your financial advisor staying in touch with you and helping you navigate today's financial climate? Invest with Edward Jones Financial Advisors Ben Erlinson, Chuck Verno, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott, who invest their time and experience back to you and your money. And like coaching athletes, investing money is about time, patience, and encouragement. Contact Ben Erlinson at 254-759-8533, Brad Wilson's location at 250 Sharon Drive in Woodway, and Cam Heathcott in Conroe. Edward Jones Financial Advisors, Ben Erlinson, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott, proud sponsors of 365 Sports. Edward Jones, making sense of investing, member SIPC.
Texas Farm Bureau Insurance has protected fellow Texans with auto, home, health, and life insurance since 1952. With more than 260,000 square miles of land and 27 million people, that's a lot to cover. Whether you're wrangling cattle or wrangling kids, we're proud to protect Texans in all Texan ways of life.
Call Deborah Holder at 254-300-7202 to see if you qualify to save up to 40% on your auto insurance.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Ben Erlinson, who'll navigate you through today's financial climate. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Welcome in 365 Sports. Paul Catalina here in the home studio. This is the, in case you're watching us for the first time, this is the original 365 Sports studio when we started in April of 2020. So occasionally we go back to the original studio and welcome in Jack Easterby. Jack, your career is very, very interesting to me in that, you know, you were in college athletics, you went to the NFL, chaplain, player personnel, you had a lot of different jobs, character coach, there's a lot of different things. And now you are moving kind of back into the college space when it comes to name, image, and likeness. What kind of sets you on this path back to college athletics?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me on, and excited about 25. I think that, you know, I grew up just like most people who play sports, right? You want to be a part of sports in any way you can. And when your career runs out, for me, I wasn't a very gifted athlete. I did play 2 sports in college, but when my eligibility was up, it was time to quit. So I had to find another way to be a part of a team. And so I was really blessed. Dave Odom at the University of South Carolina kind of made a role for me. He had kind of a situation where he needed, you know, basically a study hall guy to travel with the team and help the team travel and go through the different logistics of the year. And so he built a program through his camps where he basically had me run his summer camps and then run study hall, and basically made a position that was really student athlete services before that was popular. And then he funded it through the athletic department eventually, and then they called that position character coach. So I was really fortunate growing up at Columbia, South Carolina, to have a major university right there, right? With the University of South Carolina, the SEC was booming. And so I came back from college and started my career in a unique way, like you said, but have been so fortunate to see so many different things across the board, like whether it's obviously when cost of attendance first started, right, and how to compensate athletics, or the growth of these conferences and the amazing work of these commissioners, and then interviewing athletes as they transition from the NCAA to the NFL and watching them, you know, acquiesce into the cultures of these different clubs over the years. It's been a really cool journey. And I think that where college is right now, it's a little bit of an identity crisis, right? And I'm sure we'll get into it. I think the question becomes, for me, the skill set I've been blessed with, and then for others, the skill sets they've been blessed with, where do they best fit? And I think it's all kind of reconfiguring itself. And so, you know, we, just like almost everybody, our family, just like most sports leaders, are leaning into that to research and find where's the best place to fit, and you know, how can we best make a difference.
Yeah, I think one of the problems the NCAA has right now is they have just enough people probably still in charge at the president level that think it's going to go back if they just find that right judge to be like, and it's not at all. Like, the train has left the station. If you're still sitting there waiting, there's not another one coming. The last train's out, and you have a unique experience in this because not only on the player development emotional side, which you were a lot on, spiritual and emotional and all that, but you were in personnel. Like, you did work in personnel in the league, which this is going to have to get more like that. It's going to have to be not this. It can't be exactly the same, but it has to have some of the, there's got to be a Venn diagram, right? That things overlap. So you have a little bit of a unique look on, okay, this is what you need to do. These are financial literacy things. I heard Deion Sanders talking about this at the Alamo Bowl press conference about, look, if you're a student athlete, like, that freshman year experience class that everybody takes at school, maybe throw that one out and give everybody financial literacy. Because, look, I know when I had my first real college job, I worked at Target. I know it's going to shock you to look at me and say this, but most of that paycheck went to beer and not to, like, the other things. I blame the social pressures of Tallahassee, Florida, but still, like, those are the things you need to know. And that was what, $725 I made for working at a week at, Target, as opposed to maybe $725,000 or more that somebody's going to hand me and go, hey, here's money. Be smart. Congratulations, teenager.
That's right. And I would say this really, the way that I've looked at this and studied this over the last, let's call it 6 months, really looking at the trends and understanding the different kind of big rocks, let's say, in the jar, is this is really going back to early, like 16, 17 years old, right? Where these student athletes now are being given the opportunity to really formulate their circles, their pathways, their desired locations, their desired, where they want to live, all the different people that will be around them. That's really going to start even earlier than ever, right? So we're talking about age 16, 17, 18. They're going to have these things vetted. I told this story a lot, and I think it's so real. I can't tell you how many people I saw in the National Football League or in other places that got to the NFL and had to reconfigure their structure of their circle around making money, being successful, relocating into the town of their pro team, and then that didn't go well, right? Somebody let them down, or somebody they thought was going to help them didn't. And so in a lot of ways, even though the rules are uncodified for the current environment, and that's frustrating, I'm sure, to the leaders, that actual inner circle and the structure of the student athlete is now going to be forced to be built at 16, 17, 18 years old. And what that's going to do is help the reps of how that person develops themselves as a professional, both within their circle and within the building, so that hopefully the performance and or the other things actually get better quicker. So I think you're going to see there's a lot of challenges. I don't want to demean those by any ways. But I do want to say, I do think there's going to be some good things come from this. You're going to see kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, be more professional in how they carry themselves and their understanding of their own market value, the understanding of how they align with certain brands, cities, awareness, maybe causes that they want to bring light to, instead of 23 years old relocating to a pro city and then having to hope that they got it right.
Yeah. One of the things I think is really unique about this is not just about, the guys, like Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward, who, Cam Ward, left Wazoo last year, rolled into Miami, and, you've got Rick Ross and like all these guys that like are throwing big NIL dollars, but it's like a situation. Texas Tech has this. A lot of schools have this where the collectives is set up like, look, you're going to make $37,000 if you're on the roster. And then any NIL you make after that is kind of, based on your overall popularity and worth and, market value. And if I had $37,000 room and board paid for the whole time, there's some financial literacy that could go on in there. But like, look, you probably only have to spend about $3,000 of your own money a year if you're smart about it, and you can put the rest, into a high yield savings or something like that. Like those are big things I think that a lot of students probably don't know, especially ones that don't come from families that have a lot of financial literacy or live paycheck to paycheck, so they've never even considered it before, right?
And think about this too, all of the Rolodex of these people that, let's say, the student athlete today is able to meet, right? From production meetings to the communication with the local media, obviously the communication, like you said, with some of the financial institutions, right? Whether it's people that are managing their money or people potentially that may be educating them on how to manage their money. I mean, really, one of the coolest things that's going to come out of this is, even if you don't play in the NFL, if you don't play professional football, which obviously we know there's only 7 rounds plus obviously a post-draft kind of cobbled together set of free agents that'll actually acquiesce into the NFL. But, there's a huge pool of people, right, that will finish college football, that will have a head start, and for that matter, other college sports, right, that are paid. They will transition into the workforce with a little bit of a nest egg, a great awareness of the business of sport, and then probably a pretty good Rolodex of people they've interacted with during their college career, which will result in them hopefully being able to be impactors maybe on the sports business scene, as a career. And so not only will, I think, the financial implication, which has obviously been well documented, be, I think, impactful. I think the sports business world is getting ready to get, let's just call it thousands and thousands of professionals who understand the ins and outs of these industries every year, who graduate anticipating to be a part of this business.
What would you say the biggest thing that, we've talked about from the athlete side of it, from the leadership side of it, the university side on down, needs to embrace and put out for athletes? Because again, you could go to an institution that's embraced it, that said this is how it's going to be and do this, or you could go to one that is not there yet. So uniformly, a lot of this stuff has to come from the top. So leadership on down, what do you think is the most important thing for them to educate the student athletes on?
Well, I think there's 2 kind of challenges here. One would be obviously what's going on in our leadership of sports in America today. And I think that's really on Congress. I think Congress has got to step up and have some semblance of a set of rules that everyone can depend on them for, right? These are not-for-profit institutions that have been chartered mostly to educate the people of a certain area of our country. And so the mission of that organization, right, has surely diversified over the last several hundred years. That now when you see the massive implications of football and other sports and the impact that it has on the state economy, the regional economy, and obviously the people within those, institutions. So I think, the people in the legislative branch of our country, they have got to lean in and understand that we've got to make some rules to help these people out, right? I think that's probably the looming piece of this that nobody really wants to talk about, but it's just got to happen, because if not, no matter what the person at the institution does, they're on a treadmill, because they're going to have to change each time a new set of legislation comes down. So we need a format that says this is kind of the lens in which we're going to view the profitability of college sports. But I think, secondly, if you're at the institution, I think it's incumbent upon you to have a communication directly with your student athletes about what that institution does to separate itself for that person's whole entire life, right? Not just for that moment. I think there's going to be lots of, money thrown at athletes for their services for 6 to 8 months. With 2 transfer portal windows, right? You're really talking about a half a year contract on a lot of this stuff, where basically after a half a year, everything's being rethought, right? And so the institution, if I was, at an institution that is trying to communicate to recruits and to families and parents, hey, we want to bring your son or daughter to our institution, I think it starts with the ability to separate that institution from other institutions over the course of the athlete's entire life. So, hey, right now we may be plus or minus this other offer you have, but the idea is we want to give life skills and advance your entire life and not just give you, $10,000 more dollars than our neighbor institution or 10,000 less than our neighbor institution. So there needs to be a huge, really folder of those types of conversations that need to happen between the institutions and the recruits, so that the continuity of the institutions can matter and the growing of the people can matter. Because right now, obviously, it's just a business deal. And I think the higher ed piece of this needs to come back a little bit more into play, so that you really are educating these young people when they transition into school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're still going to be student athletes. Like, the path of which you are, I think the darkest timeline of this has, well, these guys are just employees of the university in our marketing sense now, and they're not student athletes. I don't think that that's good for anybody, because in that regard,
the student athletes have said they don't want it, right? I mean,
they don't want that.
You've heard lots of these commissioners step up and say, hey, listen, they're telling us they don't want to be employees, which I think is accurate. And also, and frankly, if you look at the market value across the board, right, the student athlete who goes to Northwestern or Southern Cal or some of the bigger number institutions that also have a high athletic profile, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in education being allocated to those student athletes. So there's an ROI component that will be added. But for sure, most athletes in the current environment have echoed the sentiment that they don't want to be employees, which I think is fair and accurate.
Yeah, I think there's a way, and like part of it is we just need some good old fashioned, American innovation on this of what is a student athlete, what is an employee, and where can you separate them and where can you join them as far as collectively bargaining goes? Because that way, and again, this is also rules that Congress can set. Because if you let your kids run around without, you make your own rules, your house is going to get wrecked, right?
Yes.
Well, you can't do that. That's why you're there. That's why Congress is the parents. So that they're supposed to be like, look, we want you to be able to do what you want to do, but we can't just let you make your own rules. And that's where it needs to come into where you can find something that's bargained, regulated, and in between to where everybody wins in some regard, but nobody wins straight up and down. It's fair.
Yeah, and I was going to say this, and I'll be curious your thoughts on this, because there's two kind of precedents that are in different, in different sectors that I think we're probably onto something. Okay, and I would be curious your thought on this, but also talking through it at large. I would say the first one was when the Player Impact Program was introduced from the PGA Tour. They introduced essentially the mentions, the likes, all of the different social impacts, and then also the appearances that every PGA Tour player, participated in, as a way to subsidize the non-earned dollars from the PGA Tour, right? So there was a year, I think you remember, maybe 2020 or 19, where Tiger Woods won it, but he hardly ever, played the whole year.
Yeah.
But that algorithm was built to show the impact that the golfers had on the tour's profitability, right? It was a direct correlation between, the name, image, and likeness idea was put into an algorithm, and they used it to say, hey, if you're selling video games, if you're obviously selling jerseys and T-shirts and these types of things, we're going to return that money to you directly from the profits of the PGA Tour, right? So to me, that idea conceptually from an algorithm standpoint, Travis Hunter probably should make more, right, than the 8th wide receiver at, an FBS school, right? So I would say that idea, that player impact idea, was a great precedent. And then the other thing that happened when the NCAA started doing cost of attendance was that they began with cost of living and other things in place with each state and each area to basically offset the expense that each student athlete occurs, right? And so then there was a lot of communication between local governments and in universities to make sure they got that number right, and every student athlete left without being hurt, basically financially, based on that. So if you raise that number up and then you come to some semblance of that PGA Tour impact program, that XY analysis to me could probably get you in some, again, facsimile of the end result of what everybody's looking for. So that if you're trending and you're producing and you have a great year, you obviously should be rewarded for that. And in the end, obviously, we don't know who that's going to be. So it's very difficult to put all the stake on that. You need to guarantee some sum of money for every athlete who walks on campus. And so to me, those are different precedents, different, obviously, worlds. But both of those had enough teeth in them to me to create some futuristic model based on both of them.
Yeah, there's that Venn diagram I was talking about earlier. That's what overlaps. That's where you can get something. I really do like those two examples. And look, I can tell you at Baylor, the big mistake that Dave Aranda made was he told us this, and it was kind of funny to hear him say it. But he had this idealistic view of it where everybody's going to be the same. Well, I mean, that's not like how it works in sports. Patrick Mahomes makes more than Justin Watson. That's
right.
How it works, And so sometimes you do need to create some incentives so that those guys that are the plus guys, come in there. Now, if everybody's taken care of, most people understand, look, I'm not Mahomes. I'm not getting that contract. But if I can be here and help, I'm going to do well for myself. And if you're one of those dudes who thinks you're worth as much as the superstar and you're not going to do well in a team concept in any walk of your life. So this is probably a temporary thing for you. That's what I've kind of always believed. But if you do intercept those concepts together, then you have an incentive for, hey, I am popular, whether I'm a good player or it's my personality. That's the other thing I think that gets lost in this. There's a lot of guys who just have great personality and have followings on social media and they can make money off of that. So if I want to buy a jersey of the nose guard who's just funny, then I can do that, and that's something else because that wasn't really there before.
That's right. And let's be honest, like you said about the Chiefs example there, I think that when you're talking about the projection of a college athlete from high school to college versus obviously from college to the NFL, there's a huge amount of multiples to the projection element, right? So when we project a wide receiver that's coming from Baylor into the league, we probably know he's going to play wide receiver, right? There's a couple gadget guys and things like that, but in the end, he's probably going to play that position. I mean, when you leave high school and you are let's say, offensive or defensive lineman, right, where you lined up in that high school formation and where you may line up in 2 years, depending on how your body grows and your strength and your association and your footwork and ability to understand, different schemes and techniques, it could totally deviate. It's really a guesswork and a projection from the recruiting person to get that person off of a high school field and into a college lineup to be one of the people that plays and starts and impacts the game. And so that variability, that versatility to that skill set, there's probably going to be a lowering of that quotient from a standpoint of guaranteed dollars because, again, there's a good chance that skill set projected is not that skill set that's functioned, right? And so universities are going to want to take a good look at that spilt milk where we projected this guy as, let's say, a 5-star tackle, and really he needs to be inside. He's not a tackle at the next level. He's probably a guard. And so then that changes the value, to your point, on what that looks like. So in my mind, I think that you want to guarantee student athletes some sum of money for their services and for them participating in an amazingly profitable business. However, you want to do that with a common sense fiscal, responsibility that can hopefully allow for the repeatability of the business to continue. Because again, if you pay guys, let's say a couple $1 million to play left tackle and he's there 6 months and then he leaves and he ends up being a guard, the ROI on that is just not consistent. So that type of a business is going to have a tough time.
Last thing I'll ask you before I let you go, because I know you've got a lot today. In the NFL, there was a time, and you were in the league when this happened, where I think of Sam Bradford all the time. Sam Bradford got picked number 1 overall before he put on shoulder pads and a helmet for the Rams. They gave him $50 million, and the veteran players kind of got mad at this because they were, hey, look, I appreciate that, but I was a 4th-round pick. I'm now the best safety in the league, but you're telling me there's no money because of this guy? Like, no. Hold on here. I think I'm wondering when that swing comes with recruiting, especially now that you add revenue sharing and the house settlement into this, where, yeah, you might get a little signing bonus for coming to, to Alabama to play quarterback. But before we start throwing the big cash at you, you got to throw some touchdown passes, right?
Yeah, right. Well, I would say this too. One of the most, I always encourage people that are learning about sports. One of the most informational or informing documents in any league is the collective bargaining agreement. Like if you, sometimes it can get dry if you're reading it all at one time, but if you really want to learn about the structure of something, reading the collective bargaining agreement is so informative to the rules of how everything operates. And to your point, there was a shift from the rookie pay scale being heavier on the signing bonus and the guarantees to the veteran salary pool or salary cap being most of the allotment for the funding for those veteran players. And listen, you could argue which one's better, and that would probably be a whole podcast full. But I think in the end, I will say this: the collective bargaining agreement of every major sport is the North Star for how things operate. People create systems off of that. They create, obviously, flow charts in their organizations because of the needs of the CBA. And in my opinion, some document like that governing above college athletics will be a blessing to all. I was laughing this morning. I heard something about the college football playoff changing their bye structure, right? The teams that get a bye.
Yeah.
And I saw in one of the fine prints that everybody has to agree in order to have the structure change to the college football playoff. So again, getting Boise State's AD or whoever the AD is that enjoyed that bye to change and say, well, we don't want to buy. I would say that's probably not happening. So again, I think that the CBAs of all of these major sporting organizations, leagues, they govern, they really do. And they have every I dotted and every T crossed. And so while I don't think unions are necessary in this case, I do believe there needs to be a governing document and a governing body that steps in on behalf of the country, really, and hopefully creates very organized structure. And then it can be edited, right? Just like any CBA is edited, just like any ongoing legislation is edited. But I think that launch, I think, will help. So if we can get this case behind us, pay out people who have, are owed money, and then reset, I think the future of college sports is going to be really fun to be a part of and watch.
I agree with you. By the way, that Boise State AD, his name's Jeremiah Dickey. He's a good friend of mine. And I promise you, he will, he would hold out until the end before he's like, hey, whoa. We're not just going to capitulate. I know him well enough. Like, look, we got to get something coming back here if we're just going to give you the buyback, if we're not going to get it automatically. No. Yeah, I know that's going to happen. Jack Easterby, been a pleasure to meet you. Been a pleasure to talk to you. This has been great, educational. I know that our viewers are going to love it. Appreciate it. Happy New Year, and thanks for hopping on with us.
Okay, you guys too. Hope you're best in 25.
That's Jack Easterby. This is 365 Sports.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Oh, man, this is the best.
Yeah, too bad we have to go to work tomorrow.
What? Why?
You know, Monday.
Where's my report? You millennials are all the same.
You okay, Dexter?
What happened?
You need Sunday scaries.
Screw you, Monday! Woo!
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
There are hundreds of things that can affect our sleep, but what's affecting yours? Sleep Doctor's home sleep test brings the precision of a sleep lab into the comfort of home to help you get answers and unlock a lifetime of great sleep. Start now at sleepdoctor.com/TV.
It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome into Paul Catalina's Top 5, the second of 2025. And of course, brought to you by TexasBeefHouse.com. Go to bidonbeef.com and use our promo code 365sports. Today, I thought we'd have a little fun and go through some of the message board posts from the last couple of days. I got to warn you, Georgia and Oregon fans, you are 4 of 5 of these, and one for Texas fans that I think that you will get a rise out of at the number 1 spot. But let's dive into it. Let's start with the erstwhile Georgia Bulldogs. This is from CRNA Dawg SC. Last teams to win Natty with recruiting, coaching, and development. Loyalty and team bond, and we did it twice in a row. I'm definitely proud of Kirby for that. Yeah, I'm just a little sour, but today they won with unlimited transfers and money. Even if we win one in the next 5 years or so, I'll be much, much prouder of 21 or 22 than I ever will be of one of the free agent market. It's no longer about building a program. Notre Dame couldn't do it the old-fashioned way, and neither could Texas or Penn State. Yes, we have to adjust to the times, and I'm sure we will, but success just seems much less meaningful now. Getting beat by Notre Dame's transfers or Ohio State's $25 million team even hurts less. Ah, yes, the Georgia Bulldogs, bastions of doing it the right way. I'm not saying anything for a second because I want you to think about that. The team with the largest recruiting budget in all of college football, yeah, sure. Kirby tries to recruit the old-fashioned way. And look, in 21, they did not take any transfers. That's true. They did in 22, though. And it's just the nature of the beast. And the fact that you wouldn't be proud of a national championship winning it this way, it's horse hockey, my friend. That is total hooey. Come on. Let's go. Message boards, the refuge of the crazy. Oregon's performance is like, what now? This is from HTG Duck on Scoop Duck. Nah, that performance ruined the entire season. Tonight was like getting married, having kids, buying a beautiful house, living a beautiful life. Then finding out your kids are biologically your best friends and she also gave you AIDS. That's how tonight felt. Like AIDS. That's how a 13-0 season that ends in a curb stomping feels. AIDS. That is the kind of Pacific Northwest depression that really therapy is needed for that. That is really rough. That game was, again, like AIDS. Well, let's go back to Georgia for a second here. Now they're just getting petty. Kirby needs to hit the gym. This is from 2 people, Red Pants 2001, responded by Testicular Fortunatus. And listen, when Testicular Fortunatus when that guy criticizes you, you know you've gone awry, Kirby Smart. Red Pants 2001 says, hired his buddies at coordinator positions, been slipping in recruiting and the portal, and has now been pantsed multiple times in front of the entire nation by inferior programs and head coaches. Maybe now he'll hire professionals at OC and DC and try to learn how the portal works. Congrats to Notre Dame and Coach Freeman on a huge win. And then our old buddy Testicular Fortitutus says he needs to hit the gym too. He's been letting himself go lately. It's not a good look nor good for his health with all the stress from coaching. Well, I'm glad that somebody's looking out for Kirby's best interests. By the way, he lost Dan Lanning. Glenn Schumann is one of the most sought-after coordinators in the country. Will Muschamp is also there with them at D.C. Now, say what you will about Mike Bobo, but they did lose Todd Monken to the NFL, and that's pretty significant there. Let's go back to Oregon, shall we? This duck was a quacking here on duck territory, which is not as good as scoop duck, and I think we all know that. How confident are you? And this is from Portland Duck. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 10. OSU is not the same team we played in Austin. We're going to abuse that patchwork OL tomorrow. The Tennessee game was fool's gold. Our secondary is much better than the Vols, and we won't be caught off guard by the play calling. That was the most wrong thing that's been said all month. That poor Portland Duck, I'm sure he feels stupid and won't post anything else dumb on the internet. That's for sure. And my favorite one, this is for you Texas fans. During the fourth quarter, there was a huge meltdown, and I'm not sure which website this is from. Might be Orange Bloods or Inside Texas, but 6 minutes ago, and this is Deej, whose picture is of Smokey, not our Smokey, but Smokey from Smokey and the Bandit, one of our great American films, with the one and only Burt Reynolds. But Deej says, after Sergeant Hulk said, Dillingham is better than Sark. Deej then responded, Jimbo is better than Sark. How quickly we forget how bad things were before Sark graciously entered the Thunderdome that is Austin, Texas. Deej, you're better than this, buddy. We all know it. In no way should you be complaining about Steve Sarkisian at all. At all. And look, they wound up winning the game. I understand people are emotional, but this is just not fair from Sergeant Hulk, which, again, you're never going to make lieutenant with that attitude, Sergeant Hulk. Do you want to be Captain Hulk one day? Colonel Hulk? Colonel Hulk? No. Deej, that's why you're not even ranked, buddy. No. Thank your lucky stars every day for Steve Sarkisian, Texas. I know most of you do, and poor Deej just needs some help. That's going to do it for the show today. We're back again on Monday. Have a great week, everybody.